Hello readers by eyes and by ears, this is Mari-chan and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I hope you all have had a good start to your week. Anyway, let's go ahead and get back into the reading of Guardian Volume 1, also known as Junhun by Priest, and we're picking up with Chapter 18, which is so long, but let's do it. Chapter 18. When a life-sized blow-up doll was delivered to 4 Bright Avenue, the courier hadn't even gotten out of earshot before Zhao Yunlan roared in fury. Gwoh-uh, Changcheng! Is that a head or a chamber pot on your neck? Dah-ching gave the large doll a curious swat, eliciting an indecent moan from it. The cat's fur stood on end. Zhao Yunlan's face turned so blue it was nearly black. He could only point a trembling finger at the doll, too enraged to speak for a solid half-minute. Changcheng curled up into his best imitation of a mushroom. He stood blankly in the corner, not even blinking. Zhao Yunlan finally swallowed the anger that was stuck in his chest. His throat hurt from choking on it. After a while, to Zhu Hong, he finally managed a weak, "Can you clothes. Find some for it." Hearing what had just come out of his mouth, he was overcome with fresh anger. He slammed the door shut, hand on his chest. Zhu Hong turned to Changcheng. "Congratulations! You've infuriated the public nuisance so badly that he's lost the power of speech." Ling patted him on the shoulder. "Xiao, I've just noticed what a warrior you are." Changcheng was on the verge of tears. Chu Shuji silently picked Daqing up and covered his eyes. Wearing his usual bitter expression, he turned away to avoid the whole offensive mess. Zhu Hong dug up a huge military bag from somewhere and stuffed the doll inside. To the air, she said, "I'm sorry. You'll have to stay inside Clarity for a little longer, but you can come in once we're off the plane." A wisp of white smoke emerged from Zhao Yunlan's watch. It circled Zhu Hong once and stopped in front of her, becoming the blurry silhouette of a girl. Zhao Yunlan had too much Yang energy. Even with Clarity's protection, it was uncomfortable for a ghost to spend so much time around him. Wang looked far weaker than before. "I think of it as being airsick," Wang said, breath thin as gossamer. Then she finally got to look at her prospective body. Her misty eyes betrayed her utter speechlessness. At this point, Changcheng was too afraid to even lift his head. When they set out, no one had the nerve to bother Director Zhao, not even Daqing, who turned into a finger-sized kitty phone charm and hung obediently on Zhu Hong's phone. Their boss, meanwhile, looked like he was heading to the airport to hijack a plane. That lasted until they ran into Shun Way and his students at the gate. Zhao Yunlan's expression had been as dark as the bottom of a pot. Right before everyone's eyes, it cleared up in an instant. His icy gaze thawed, and the black aura that had been swirling around him moments before vanished as if it had never existed. Without a moment's hesitation, he abandoned his colleagues and strode toward the man at the center of a group of students. What a coincidence! As coincidences went, this was almost unbelievable. Shun Wei's eyes flashed. It was the very opposite of a pleasant surprise. He nodded at Zhao Yunlan as if not in control of his own body. "Officer Zhao?" Ling recognized Shun Wei. Confused, he said, "Is that Shun Laosher, the guy who was trapped in the hospital with Xiao Guo that time? Didn't the boss wipe his memories?" "Not completely," Zhu Hong snorted softly. "I don't think the public nuisance has good intentions." Chu Shuji studied Shun Wei's face from afar. "I think his intentions all have to do with lust." Zhao Yunlan placed himself in a very particular spot near Shun Wei. Not quite intimately close, but near the normal socializing distance, leaving Shun Wei unable to either avoid him or get closer. Dropped in the midst of a group who had stepped outside their ivory tower, Zhao Yunlan and his silver tongue quickly won the trust of the naive students. After only a minute or two of chatting, he'd learned their exact destination and the subject of their field research. "You guys are going to Qingxi village too?" Zhao Yunlan gave Shun Way a meaningful look. "This really is an unbelievable coincidence. It's written in the stars." The reference to fate set Shun Wei's nerves jangling. His fingers curled tightly around his knees. Zhao Yunlan put on a show of being worried. The plane can only land in the nearby city. The drive from there to Qingxi village is at least a dozen hours, all on winding mountainous roads. How are you guys planning on getting there? Shun Wei immediately saw what Zhao Yunlan was angling for, but unfortunately, none of his travel companions caught on. Before Shun Wei could open his mouth, the class leader, a young woman in red, responded, "By bus." "I know just the one you mean," Zhao Yunlan said. "It only goes once a day, and it leaves at 6 in the morning, right? It doesn't stop at Qingxi village." The class leader said, "Yes, I checked the map. I think you can get off midway through the route and walk the rest of the way. It doesn't seem far." "In some respects it's not, but for you city kids, it'll probably take 4 or 5 hours." Zhao Yunlan watched Shun Wei from the corner of his eye, keeping his cool. "In this country, there are prairies to the east and mountains to the west. Those mountainous regions are nothing like Dragon City. It doesn't look far on the map, but you might need to cross several mountains with no roads or paths. And 4 or 5 hours is assuming you don't get lost. Think about it. By the time you get off the bus, it'll be evening. At that point, with a 5-hour walk ahead of you, you'll probably have to camp out. Given the season, it's colder than you can imagine out there. Do you guys want to sleep in the snow?" As expected, this turned the startled students into a flock of panicked chicks. Zhao Yunlan gauged that they were adequately frightened. "See, it really is fate that we bumped into each other. You should come with us. I have some friends out there, so I'll ask them to have a few cars ready. Since we're all going to the same place, we might as well travel together. That way, we can take care of each other. What do you guys think?" The class leader hesitated. "That isn't too much trouble for you?" Zhao Yunlan waved dismissively. He slung an arm around Shun Wei's shoulder and winked at her. "Not at all. Do you know what kind of relationship we have?" "Don't mess," Shun Wei began. "Neighbors," Zhao Yunlan smirked, not letting him go. "Remember this, students. In the future, when you go out into the world, you can't count on distant relatives the way you can count on close neighbors. If you get along, neighbors can be closer than family. Right, Shun Laosher?" Shun Wei had nothing to say in response. "All right," Zhao Yunlan said solicitously, straightening up. "I'll bet you haven't eaten yet. Hold on." He left and soon returned, carrying a few bags of fast food. As he passed by, he casually shoved 2 at Guo Changcheng. Chu Shuju whistled at him. "That's unusual. I thought he'd forgotten we exist." Ling chanted a ritual apology to a piece of fried chicken. "Amitabha, apologies for my transgression." Formalities observed, this sad excuse for a monk, a man who both drank alcohol and ate meat, eagerly stuffed the chicken leg into his mouth and reached for a bottle of Coke. Guo Changcheng's armload of food was gone in the blink of an eye. He was at a loss when someone handed him a burger. Turning, he realized it was Zhu Hong, but she wasn't looking at him. Instead, she was staring in Zhao Yunlan's direction. Whatever Zhao Yunlan was saying made the entire group of students laugh. Some people were naturally the center of everyone's attention, no matter where they were. "Think," Guo Changcheng began. "You're welcome," Zhu Hong said before he could finish. In a tiny voice, she asked, "That guy named Shun, who is he?" Guo Changcheng followed her gaze. "He's a professor at Dragon City University. He was a big help during the last case. Before Director Zhao got there, we dealt with the Hunger Ghost together, but Director Zhao said he wouldn't remember that." Zhu Hong's delicate eyes narrowed. "He's already a professor?" she muttered. "He looks so young. Aren't professors usually older? Is he married then?" Changcheng scratched his head in confusion. How would I know? Zhu Hong spared him a quick side-eye before looking back at Zhao Yunlan. Shun Way had just taken a chicken nugget, and Zhao Yunlan was already holding the dipping sauce in easy reach. Even from this distance, she could see the softness in his gaze. He could have been an entirely different person from the grouchy comrade who'd spent all morning yelling. He must not have a family yet, Zhu Hong said quietly after observing for a while. The public nuisance is beyond shameless, but he doesn't start something with someone who's spoken for. Ugh, my fucking eyes! Zhao Yunlan's phone rang again, as if it were a hotline. Holding his drink in one hand and his phone in the other, he leaned down at lightning speed and stole a fry right out of Shen Wei's hand with his mouth. He ate it in 2 bites and licked his lips, eyes locked on Shun Wei, whose fingers made a hasty retreat. The SID's boss abandoned them for 3.5 hours. Once on the plane, Zhao Yunlan switched his seat, claiming he wanted to hear Shun Laoshi speak to his students about the customs in Qingxi village. Eventually, they landed in the airport nearest the village. As they approached the exit, a fat middle-aged man bundled in a fur coat came into view. The man, holding a sign that said Director Zhao, was craning his neck in all directions. Zhao Yunlan strode over to him, both groups in tow. The man's hesitant expression cleared when it became obvious that Zhao Yunlan was headed his way. Correctly guessing who Zhao Yunlan was, he offered a warm welcome. Director Zhao, you must be Director Zhao, right? I can tell by your energy that you're not just anyone. No wonder you're a leader at your tender age. Leader? Me? Zhao Yunlan took a step forward and shook the man's hand in both of his own. It's so cold here. The only thing that kept me from being anxious the whole trip was knowing you'd be here to meet us. The man, whose name was Lang Ge, gave him a forceful handshake. When Xie Laoge called and told me to arrange a few cars for him, of course I agreed. Xie Ge and I are sworn brothers. His friends are my friends. How does that saying go? If friends are coming from afar, I must welcome them myself. You and Xie Sige are that close? Zhao Yunlan feigned astonishment, eyes wide. He pointed at Lang Ge, face serious. Us? Friends. We're brothers. Xie Sige's brother is my brother too. Don't treat me like a stranger or I'll be angry. Lang Ge laughed, immediately accepting the offering. I wouldn't dream of it. From now on, I'll tell everyone I have a bro who's an official in Dragon City. What a feather in my cap. Come on, let's get you all settled, and then we'll have a welcome dinner. Don't be polite with me now. Being polite to your Lao Ge shows disrespect. The two of them carried on like that extensively, acting out the roles of love at first sight in front of everyone without even a blush. Just like that, strangers became brothers. Shun Wei and his students looked at each other before following along despite their confusion. Lang Ge feted them all with a true feast, then arranged for them to stay in the area's only 5-star hotel. Before sunrise the next morning, 3 SUVs were ready and waiting outside the hotel. A look in the trunks revealed thick coats, camping gear, calorie-dense food, medicine, the works, all of it brand new. Everything had been thought of. It was almost enough to sponsor a professional research team. Zhao Yunlan took it in stride, as if it weren't far too great a gift. He had Ling Jing give each driver a carton of Chonghua cigarettes, then launched into another round of affectionate bullshit with Lang Ge, who'd come to see them off. Lang Ge was overflowing with enthusiasm. The only indication that Zhao Yunlan had knocked him out with 14 shots of baijiu the night before was the fact that his face was swollen like a pig's. Footnote 31, baijiu, a strong, colorless Chinese liquor that usually has alcohol percentage of 35 to 60%. Returning to the reading. After bidding Lang Ge a reluctant farewell, Zhao Yunlan quietly spoke to Shun Wei. Driving on winding mountain roads is tricky. Why don't you all come along with us? Ling, Zhu Hong, and I will handle the driving. We can drive the students between us and regroup at Qingxi Village. What do you say? It was more than even a paid tour guide would offer. Declining outright would have made Shun Wei seem ungrateful, but one couldn't just accept a favor for no reason. And Shun Wei didn't have Zhao Yunlan's shamelessness. He seemed incredibly apologetic even after he was in the vehicle. This is all because I didn't plan well enough. We're causing you so much trouble. What's more, I don't even know Mr. Long, yet he spends so much money. Once we're back, do you think we should mail him some gifts? Zhao Yunlan gave an arrogant wave. It's all good. Don't you worry about a thing. No one offers help for no reason. It's all on my tab. Besides, there's absolutely no need for you to be polite with me. Shun Wei had no reply. They happened to be at a red light, so Zhao Yunlan braked and turned to beam at him, dimples out in full force. Color suffused Shun Wei's face. He took a quick look at the students in the back and seemed to exhale in relief when he saw them both excitedly looking out the window. It occurred to Zhao Yunlan that he could try making another move. He reached over to gently smooth out a caught corner of Shun Wei's collar. When his curled finger grazed the tender skin just below Shun Wei's earlobe, it could have been unintentional. Just fixing your collar, he said, straightening back up and adjusting the rear view mirror. This time, Shun Wei's blush reached his ears. The light changed and Zhao Yunlan stepped on the gas. He focused entirely on the road ahead, but the corners of his mouth quirked up. Shun Wei focused his attention out the window. He seemed embarrassed, but what Zhao Yunlan didn't see, with Shun Wei's back to him, was how his blush faded and he turned pale. His brows seemed constantly furrowed, as if the deep crease between them became more permanent. An indescribably cold harshness marred that gentle, scholarly face and gave him a lonely, distant air. Driving up the winding mountain roads was strenuous. The ride was jolting and nauseating, and after 6 or 7 hours, the 2 students in the back were slumped over, sound asleep. The farther they went, the narrower and more twisted the roads got. The edge of the cliff was less than a meter from the tires, even without a railing between them and the long, long fall to the bottom. Fortunately, the cars Lange had provided were as good as they looked, and Zhao Yunlan, despite his unreliable act, was a steady driver. The ride had more tense moments, but no danger. As they got deeper into the mountains, the temperature dropped more and more. Heavy snow began accumulating along the roadside, and there was less and less sign of human life. The 3 vehicles had stuck close together since leaving, but the distance between them had been increasing even as they drove more slowly. When Zhao Yunlan carefully down-drifted and came to a stop, the 2 cars following in his wake did the same. "This road's getting a little iffy," said Zhao Yunlan, opening the door. "I think we need to put on the snow chains." To Shun Wei, he said, "It's cold out here. Stay put." Shun Wei ignored him and jumped down to help. The wind in the deep mountains was harsh as a steel whip, strong enough to knock a man over. The cold was bad, but the truly frightening prospect was snowstorms. The wind was enough to cut through even an extra thick down coat and chill you to the core. Never mind the fitted jacket Zhao Yunlan was wearing only because it flattered him. Awake now, the 2 students considerately offered to help, but Zhao Yunlan locked them inside. "Stay where you are and don't add to the chaos. Catching a cold in a place like this is no joke." Between them, Shun Wei and Zhao Yunlan quickly got the chains onto the tires, but their fingers were frozen stiff by the time they finished. Zhao Yunlan straightened up and looked into the distance. The snowy mountains seemed endless, neighboring a huge glacier. The thin clouds and the mountains overlapped in an eternal expanse of earth and sky. He called the other drivers and reminded them of what to watch out for when driving in the current conditions, then emphasized, "We're entering glacier territory. Keep quiet and do not honk. If there's an avalanche, there will be nothing left of the SID but the night shift." There was snow everywhere. The sun was starting to dip in the west, and the sky's crispness was blurring softly. As the light faded and there were fewer and fewer tire tracks on the ground, and the bleak, desolate cold gradually intensified, even as they drew closer to the distant glacier, it became harder to make out. There was a final flash of reflected cold light from its tip, and then even that was gone. Zhao Yunlan turned on the headlights. Shun Wei, afraid of distracting him, didn't make a sound. The vehicle slowed to a crawl. Outside were thousands of meters of cliff face, sheer white in every direction, except for the occasional mottled grayish-brown of mountain rock. The white snow covering the dark mountain provided the last light in the southern sky. Once it faded, full dark descended. The two students in the back were the red-clad class leader and a boy in small framed glasses. Both were afraid to even breathe too heavily. Little Glasses quietly asked Shen Wei, "Lao Shi, will we get out of the mountains today? Will we be able to find somewhere to sleep?" Before Shun Wei could answer, Zhao Yunlan replied, "Don't worry, Qingxi village's border is on the snowy mountain. After this stretch, we should be almost there, but—" A sudden tiny light blinded him before he finished the thought. Zhao Yunlan downshifted at once, then carefully braked to a stop. "What is it?" the class leader asked nervously. Shun Wei gave her a wave. "It's all right. There's some sort of light up ahead. You two stay here and I'll go take a look." "You saw it too?" Zhao Yunlan asked. They exchanged solemn glances. The girl was sensitive enough to realize that something about the atmosphere felt wrong. Is it a street light?" "No street lights on this road." Zhao Yunlan turned around. "You two, don't leave the car. There's chocolate and beef jerky in the back. If you're hungry, just grab some." Having said that, he pushed the door open and got out, with Shun Wei close behind. The wind had stopped at some point, but the cold and gloom had only deepened. It wasn't the bitter cold of ice and snow, but the wet sort that crept into the bones and lingered, radiating chill from the inside out. There was deep silence all around. Even that light a short way off was cold, flickering as if someone was holding a lantern. It somehow evoked the image of white paper lanterns used in funeral processions in old times. In the short time it had taken to get out of the car, the light seemed to have gotten even closer. The sound of the wind and falling snow had completely stopped. They instinctively stepped lightly. Zhao Yunlan's eyes suddenly widened. He opened the car door and shoved Shun Wei inside, then waved to the people who'd gotten out of the other vehicles to see what was going on, signaling them to get back in and stay there. Diving back inside, he engaged the locks. In that small span of time, the light had drawn close enough that a person's silhouette was visible. Zhao Yunlan gave the students urgent instructions. "No matter what you see, keep your mouth shut. Don't press your face against the window, and don't make a sound." The windows had fogged up in the cold. Only the windshield was clear enough to easily see what was approaching. Someone carrying a lantern, leading a large group toward the stopped cars. There were men and women among them, but they were outnumbered by children and the elderly. The people's clothing seemed to be in rags, as if they were fleeing a great famine. Was it possible that so many people were walking along the mountain road intended for cars? Who are those people?" the class leader asked. Her trembling voice was very small. "Those aren't people," Zhao Yunlan murmured. "It's a ghost army passing through." The girl clapped a hand over her mouth. At this range, the people's dull-eyed faces were visible. Every one of them was covered in terrible wounds. Strangest of all was the person in the lead, holding the paper lantern. They wore a very tall hat that reached all the way down to their chin. If they had a face, it couldn't be seen. There was only a deathly pale tip of chin peeking out. Their entire body was snowy white, as if made from papier-mâché, and as stiff as a kite being carried closer on the breeze. The paper person wasn't looking at the road, but somehow managed to avoid the vehicle completely. In fact, as they passed by, everyone in the car saw them pause through the fogged window. They bowed to the car twice. Zhao Yunlan gave a slight nod of acknowledgement, returning the greeting. The paper person continued to float forward, followed by the crowd. They headed down the mountain road. It wasn't until the whole procession had receded into the distance that Zhao Yunlan got back out. Grabbing a flashlight from the trunk, he told Shun Way, "Something might have happened up ahead. I need to take a look. You take care of these kids." Shun Wei's brow creased. Zhao Yunlan grabbed his hand and was shocked by how cold it was. That one touch gave him the feeling that Shun Wei was desperately drinking in his body heat. His heart ached faintly in response. "Don't frown," Zhao Yunlan said. "It'll be okay." Chapter 19. The fierce wind became even more aggressive. It whipped the snow high off the ground, lashing people's faces. The sky and ground changed colors. The glow of Zhao Yunlan's flashlight was no brighter than a firefly, and he quickly vanished from sight in the blustering snow. 20 minutes later, when he still hadn't returned, Shun Wei could no longer wait. "Stay put and do not get out of the car," Shun Wei told the students. "Hand me a flashlight and I'll go check on him. I'll be right back." "Lao Shi," the class leader stopped him, clearly worried. "Could something have happened?" Shun Wei paused. Between the dim light and his thin glasses, his face revealed nothing. "No. What could possibly happen to him under my watch?" Bundling himself up tightly in his coat, he pushed the car door open, got out, and set off in long strides. A crow's hoarse call sounded by his ear. Shun Wei took off his snow-covered glasses and looked up to see a bird standing there in the endless snow. It looked as much like a crow as it sounded, but it was much larger than an ordinary one. Its long, slender tail dragged behind it, and it stared directly at him with blood-red eyes. It showed no sign of fearing humans. Instead, its examination of Shun Wei seemed keenly interested. Shun Wei took a few more steps with great difficulty. The large bird kept watching him, then tilted its head back and cawed suddenly. After that long cry, it silently lowered its head until its beak nearly touched the ground, as if it were mourning. The wind-whipped snow blurred Shun Wei's vision. He felt as if he'd been frozen, not merely stiff, but truly numb, as if the blood in his veins had stopped flowing and his nerve endings had iced over. But miraculously, his frozen sense of smell picked up on something. It was unpleasant, but not overwhelmingly so. It was as if something foul were rotting under the deep white snow. He stopped suddenly, taking a closer look at a particular patch of snow. There was the slightest bulge beneath the surface. Something was moving, heading toward the mountaintop. There was something underground. For a second, Shun Wei nearly forgot himself. His hands instinctively clenched into fists as a terrible ruthlessness flooded the darkness of his eyes. The snowy ground began to boil under the weight of his gaze. The thing lurking below was on the verge of bursting to the surface. But then a voice suddenly rang out behind him. "Didn't I tell you to wait in the car? Why are you out here?" Shun Wei twitched. The murderous intent in his eyes evaporated, leaving him looking a little lost. Before he could turn, something was being wrapped around him. Maybe Zhao Yunlan was truly oblivious to the cold, or maybe he was gritting his teeth and bearing it, but either way, he'd opened his own coat and drawn Shun Wei into it. The heat of his body was palpable, reaching Shun Wei through his thin knit sweater. Zhao Yunlan's face was nearly blue with cold, but the smile blossoming there was warm, if a bit stiff from the chill. "Did you come to look for me?" he asked. "Don't respond to him." A desperate scream tore through Shun Wei's heart. "Don't respond." But the fierce wind had sliced his reason to ribbons, thin as a cicada's wing. Under his will, as if bewitched, he nodded. Zhao Yunlan started to chuckle quietly. With his arm around Shun Wei's shoulder, he drew Shun Wei into something like an embrace. They were suddenly so close that the tip of his nose nearly touched Shun Wei's face. When Zhao Yunlan exhaled, the warmth of it brushed Shun Wei's skin like a kiss. Shun Wei held his breath, his heart beat like thunder. With the icy wind filling the air with snow, Zhao Yunlan might have been the only tangible thing in existence between the vast earth and sky. Let's get going. Zhao Yunlan backed off quickly, leaving the echo of a touch. His husky voice shattered the liminal atmosphere enveloping them, as if jolting them from a dream. Shun Wei followed silently. They were close in height and tripping over each other's feet as they walked, so Zhao Yunlan clipped the little flashlight to his collar and held Shun Wei's hand. Shun Wei struggled reflexively, but Zhao Yunlan just tightened his grip. "Stop fidgeting," Zhao Yunlan said, right by his ear, "and watch your step. It's slippery." The large bird standing at the roadside suddenly shot into the sky. It circled twice, then flew off into the distance. Zhao Yunlan followed Shun Wei's gaze. "That's a mourning bird. The elderly say massive crows like that with really long feathers are called mourning birds. They only appear during a huge disaster. They're inauspicious." He didn't wait for Shun Wei to respond as his brow furrowed and his eyes flashed in a show of confusion. "Is your birth chart jinxed?" he asked. "How come you always run into things like these?" "What happened?" Shun Wei, clearly not wanting to deal with his probing, changed the subject. Zhao Yunlan didn't pursue. "I took a look up ahead. We probably need to find somewhere to spend the night. I think there was an avalanche a little further on. The roads are blocked." They'd reached the car. As he spoke, he tried to pull the door open, but his hands were too cold for him to apply any force. He tried twice to no avail. Shun Wei opened it for him. "Get inside and get warm." Once in the car, the heat made Zhao Yunlan feel a little dizzy. He massaged his temples and accepted a piece of chocolate the class leader handed him. "This road is about 7 or 8 years old. It's a pretty niche road trip route, but there was a travel magazine feature on it. I remember that there were a few villages at the bottom of the mountain. Enough tourists visit that lots of villagers have turned their homes into inns, but we can't get through using the road ahead, and I can't see anything under the mountain. Even with binoculars, I could just barely make out some large trees under the snow. There were only a few branches sticking out." Carefully, Little Glasses said, "Then the people who passed by, they were villagers who died in the avalanche? I've heard accounts from elderly folks of ghost army sightings during large earthquakes." Zhao Yunlan shook his head, then took out his phone and dialed a number. After exchanging a few simple greetings, he started asking about the monitoring of local geological disasters. Okay, thank you. No worries. We should be fine for a night. I know what to do." He hung up. "Well, that's a bit of a problem." "Was it really an avalanche?" "It was just on the news," Zhao Yunlan said. "It's a catastrophic natural disaster, much worse than the earthquake. Apparently, several villages down below have been buried. The emergency squad is trying to figure something out, but I don't think there's any hope." The class leader asked, "Then where will we stay? In the car? Can we keep the heat on the whole night? What if we run out of gas?" "We have enough gas, but it's not safe to stay here overnight right after an avalanche. We need to get to higher ground. Don't be afraid. Just follow me. There's a little house at the top of the mountain. I'm not sure what it's for, but I took a look through the binoculars and saw that it at least has a roof, even if there isn't anyone there." Feeling a little warmer now, Zhao Yunlan buttoned up his coat and got back out of the car. He opened the trunk and pulled out a huge bag of food and a few warm outdoor coats. He tossed them to the others. "Put the coats on and eat something. Whatever you can't eat, bring it with you. I'll tell the people behind us to come too. We'll set out and carry the sleeping bags and tents. Young lady, you can just carry the food. I'll carry your sleeping bag for you." Once Zhao Yunlan had filled the others in, they quickly bundled up, packed, and hurried over. Shun Wei, who had always had an eye for details, noticed that there suddenly seemed to be an extra person among them. "Oh?" The person was at the back of the group, not making a sound. The figure suggested a woman, but between the thick layers of clothing and the face being covered, it was hard to be sure. There was something profoundly strange about her. It might have been because she was badly chilled, but there was a bizarre lack of coordination in the way she moved. Zhu Hong occasionally fell back and spoke to her, getting only a nod or a shake of a head in response. Shun Wei noticed that if her head moved, her feet stopped. She would only resume walking slowly after shaking her head, as if only one body part could move at a time. While he was mulling it over, an arm suddenly hooked around his shoulders. The back of a hand touched his face. The gesture was far too intimate. Shun Wei couldn't allow it in front of everyone, but also couldn't flinch away from it. He stood stock still. Fortunately, Zhao Yunlan quickly took his hand away. "How come you're so sensitive to the cold?" Awkwardly, Shun Wei said, "I'm not cold." "What do you mean you're not cold? Your lips are blue," Zhao Yunlan interrupted. He took off the windbreaker he'd only just put on and wrapped it around Shun Wei, leaving no room for argument. Shocked, Shun Wei grabbed his hand. "What are you doing? You said yourself that catching cold in a place like this is no joke." "I'm wearing a thermal undershirt." Zhao Yunlan tugged his collar down. "Even if we're staying down there with the villagers, they wouldn't have heating. I came prepared, unlike you guys. Hurry up and put it on." When Shun Wei was still unwilling, Zhao Yunlan softened his voice. "Come on, don't make me worry." Shun Wei had no defenses against that look and tone. In a flash, Zhao Yunlan had finished bundling him up in the coat and headed to the back of the group. "Watch your step," he called. "Hold on to each other. Xiao Guo, get your Zhu Hong Jie's luggage. Can't you pay more attention to that kind of thing? What are your eyes for? Breathing?" With the memory of Director Zhao's earlier fury in mind, Changcheng shrank a little, wordlessly scampered to the back of the group and took Zhu Hong's bags. Shun Wei's eyes stayed on Zhao Yunlan's back for a little while. His hand lingered over the fading trace of Zhao Yunlan's body heat. He rubbed at it, unwilling to let go. Then he pulled up the zipper and pressed on the pendant hanging at his collarbone. It emitted a faint warmth that stood out clearly against the endless ice and snow. It was so terribly faint, but it offered so much comfort. The group walked for about half an hour before finally spotting the little house Zhao Yunlan had mentioned. But seeing it was only the first step, after all, one could have a destination in sight and still ride a horse to death before reaching it. Actually getting there took another half-hour. The house was made of stone, with a wooden frame on the outside. The roof was some sort of cowhide, making it windproof and able to withstand the weight of snow. A small garden surrounded the hut, and outside there was a worn old fence, almost buried in snow. It looked old and run down and lonely, jarring against the landscape on the mountain top. Just as Zhao Yunlan reached out to open the little wooden gate, Dah-ching, who had been hiding in Zhu Hong's bag all this time, suddenly sprang up. Before anyone could even wonder where a cat had come from, he gave a sharp yowl, fur standing on end. Zhao Yunlan grabbed hold of him. "What is it?" Daqing's eyes were locked on the snowed-in garden. Behind them, a voice spoke up. Zheng's voice, almost sighing. "Director Zhao, Daqing wants you to know that there's something buried in this yard." If Zheng had still been alive, her voice would have been considered pleasant. But she was a ghost, and her voice, like the rest of her, was well past its expiry date. Her distinctive floaty tone could make anyone who heard it break out in goosebumps. In this case, the suddenness with which she spoke scared everyone into silence. Zhao Yunlan rubbed his hands together, warming them a bit. "Everyone wait here a minute. I'll go take a look." He pushed the gate open, confident that his skills would protect him. When he entered, Shun Way was right behind him. The frozen ground was very uneven for some reason. Zhao Yunlan slowed his footsteps and circled the yard once. The black cat's eyes glowed like two small lanterns, a faint red illumination in the dark. Suddenly, he freed himself from Zhao Yunlan's arms, raced to a corner of the garden, and started digging at a small bulge in the ground with his fat paws. Zhao Yunlan quickly knelt beside him, grabbing him by the collar and hefted him up. With no care for his jacket, he wiped Dah-ching's claws on his sleeve. Then he shined his flashlight on the spot where Dah-ching had been digging. At first, he only saw a glimpse of something ivory-colored. He pulled out a little shovel he'd hidden in his boot and dug around roughly, exploring deeper, until a fattish forehead and half of an empty eye socket came into view. He dug up half a skull. Shun Wei, having followed them in, surveyed the small garden. He took in all the bumps in the ground and had a sudden chilling thought. They were probably standing on countless human bones just beneath the surface. He turned back to look at the shivering students at the gate, then bent down and touched Zhao Yunlan's arm. "Bury it for now," he said quietly. "Don't make a big deal of it." Zhao Yunlan covered the skull back up with the frozen dirt, then stood as if nothing had happened. He waved for the students and his subordinates to come in. "It's okay. There are just some broken shingles buried all over the yard. Walk carefully and don't twist an ankle. The ground's uneven. Put up the tents once you're inside and make sure to stay warm." He tucked his little shovel away and lit a cigarette, shivering. Standing to the side, he waited for everyone to get in first. Wang hung back as the others entered. She stopped in front of Zhao Yunlan and whispered, "You saw it?" "Mm-hmm." "It's more than one layer deep," she said. Zhao Yunlan's blood went cold. "I've never seen someone add a top bunk to a huge communal bed. It's way too cramped here. If we squish in with them, will they complain to property management?" "It's true that there are certain taboos here." Wang paused. "I'll go and tell them. As long as we carry out the correct rituals, it shouldn't be a problem if we stay here for a night." Zhao Yunlan nodded. "Hurry," he urged. Wang counted her steps to the door, backed up slightly, turned, and slowly knelt. Raising her hands above her head, she prostrated herself in worship in the direction of the garden, performing the ceremonial gestures with great formality. The curious students hovered by the door. Shun Wei shushed them one by one, then pushed them inside before they could see what he had just seen. The tip of Wang now visible finger had the distinct look of plastic, and the short lock of hair peeking out from under her huge hood was clearly fake nylon hair. Zhao Yunlan stood against the wall of the house and watched Wang. She knelt by the door, speaking the language of an unknown ethnic group in a low voice. No one understood her, but there was a feeling of notes flowing from her mouth like water. They resonated in the garden, as though awakening an ancient soul. The sound stirred something in the depths of the heart. Everyone in the little house, including Shun Wei's students, felt it. The youths all lowered their heads involuntarily, solemn and respectful. Only Zhao Yunlan, cigarette between his lips, seemed completely unmoved. What was that?" Zhu Hong couldn't help asking quietly. "The souls of my dead ancestors." Wang stood up, stiffly brushing dirt from her pants. "I've greeted them, so it should be fine now. Let's not all squeeze in the doorway. Come sit inside. Remember not to throw garbage into the garden, and always offer a greeting before going outside. If you need to relieve yourself, stay away from the garden." Somehow, hearing her say that was reassuring. Everyone bowed toward the garden and went indoors to get away from the wind. Wang waited until everyone else was inside before speaking to Zhao Yunlan, voice low. "Director Zhao, you were born with the ability to see into a different world. You have always associated yourself with things that other people don't believe in. You have always acknowledged the existence of ghosts and gods, and yet when passing by shrines or temples, you've never shown an ounce of respect. That's not right." Zhao Yunlan carelessly flicked cigarette ash onto the window frame. With a smile, he nodded. You're absolutely right. My behavior is intolerable. No one should follow my example. Even the Constitution recognizes the freedom of religion, and one should always maintain a certain level of respect for other people's beliefs. Even coming from fake plastic eyes, Wang Zheng's gaze was piercing. Her voice dropped almost to a whisper. Within the 3 realms and 6 directions, there will always be people and things you don't understand. Footnote 32. The 6 directions, Liu-he, are up, down, left, right, forward, and back. They define all of the physical space. Returning to the reading. Yes, you may be capable, but can any living human, no matter how great their abilities, be more powerful than the heavens and earth? Can a human be more powerful than fate? A person can't live too arrogantly, directed Zhao. If someone is too arrogant to even respect all the gods and Buddhas, they may suffer the consequences one day. Zhao Yunlan's smile dimmed slightly. He reached out and adjusted Wang Zheng's hood and clothes where they'd slipped out of place. The gesture was careful and gentle, but his words were cold. My conscience is clear, and I have nothing to ask for. Gods or Buddhas, demons or monsters, who dares judge me? They're so lofty and great, but what does that have to do with me? Wang Zheng gave him a deep look, then sighed. She stretched out a plastic hand and tapped the air a few times, chanted something unintelligible, and then gently tapped Zhao Yunlan's forehead. You're a good person, she said in her ethereal voice. The gods are benevolent. May they forgive you and protect you. Zhao Yunlan didn't avoid her touch. He even lowered his head so she could reach his forehead more easily. Once she finished, he said, You were a good person when you were alive, too. Did the gods forgive and protect you? There was a trace of sadness in the plastic eyes as Wang Zheng looked up at him. He nudged her shoulder. The wind is brutal out here. Sweet girl, go hurry inside. Inside, Zhu Hong and Chu Shuzhi worked smoothly and efficiently together. In no time at all, they'd set up a small outdoor ethanol burner. They filled a little pot around 20 centimeters wide with clean snow. Zhu Hong had also set up a rack and put the vacuum-sealed beef jerky on it to be heated by the steam. Once the meat had softened a little, she skewered it and roasted it on the fire. A few students had already taken out their notebooks. As soon as they saw Wang Zheng come in, their eyes lit up. They quickly surrounded her, and a boy who looked like a stick of bamboo spoke up, a little nervous. Jie, would you mind if we asked about the customs of this little mountain house? As soon as he'd asked, he couldn't help looking at Shun Way and noticing a slight crease in his brow. Apprehensive now, the student added, sorry, I mean, only if it's convenient for you. If there's any sort of taboo, never mind. Please don't be angry. We didn't know. Wang Zheng sat down next to the little stove. Quietly, she said, It's okay. Keeping her hands inside her wide sleeves, she picked up a piece of chocolate from the pile beside her. It was unclear who had bought them, but the tiny chocolate balls were individually wrapped and rather exquisite. It seemed as if Wang Zheng really wanted to try one, but with her hands in her sleeves, despite passing it between them several times, she couldn't open the packaging. The red-clad class leader picked up another one and passed it to her. This one's good, Jie. Eat this one. I'm just looking, Wang Zheng said softly. I can't eat. Candy. She kept speaking. There were several geological changes here, so the people living at the foot of this mountain went through many, many years of migration and integration. At the very beginning, a group of Kampas settled here. Sky rituals are popular among Tibetans. When someone dies, their corpse is given to the sky burial master to be dismembered. Larger bones are smashed to bits and then mixed with yak butter and barley flour, making them easy for birds to eat. That ensures nothing is left behind. If any of the body remains, it's a bad omen. So the role of the sky burial master was very important. This place we're staying in was originally where the sky burial master lived. Footnote 33, Kampas is a group of people originating from the area of Kham in central Tibet. Back to the reading. The class leader shivered. Wang Zheng didn't notice. Even though sky burial masters were highly respected, their regular contact with the dead meant that they were also inauspicious. Despite their high prestige, other people ordinarily preferred to avoid contact with them. Hearing that made Changcheng think of someone else, the soul executing emissary. Wasn't he also respected but feared by everyone? Other than Zhao Yunlan, no one dared speak an unnecessary word to him. Even ghosts avoided him, as if he would bring some sort of fearsome bad luck. Over the next centuries, many other ethnic groups came. Most were herdsmen, but some were farmers. Several large conflicts erupted between the different groups. They would have a truce, then fight, then have a truce again. After fighting, they would make off with people from the other tribes. After a truce, they would intermarry. Their bloodlines slowly began to mix. Other ethnic groups also began to practice sky burial, just slightly differently from the Tibetan way. Wang was like a history teacher. She spoke simply and straightforwardly, conveying information in a gentle voice that made it easy for readers to nod off. Shun Wei's students had an advantage here. After all, this was their field trip. They were all eagerly taking notes. Zhao Yunlan, on the other hand, dragged his sleeping bag next to Shen Wei's after eating a few pieces of beef jerky. Having claimed the best spot possible, he crawled into the sleeping bag and closed his eyes to rest. As time went on, the climate in the region grew worse and worse. Wang added a little water to the pot. Fewer and fewer people remained. Most of them gradually migrated to other regions. Later, around, I can't really remember when. I think maybe it was around the Song or Yuan dynasties that a huge disaster occurred there. After that, the culture of multiple ethnicities cohabiting practically ceased to exist. Other than a small group of Hanga who hid in the cave, everyone either died or fled and never returned. The class leader asked, "Is there any historical record of this?" Wang shook her head. Back then, this area wasn't part of the Central Plains and hadn't mixed with Han culture. What's more, the area was remote and the population was never large. News can't make its way in or out. If you checked the history books, at most you might find a note about the local geology or astronomy. The government at the time didn't even know there were people here. According to local legends passed down orally, that year the snow from the mountain transformed into fanged, clawed monsters. White monsters reached up from cracks in the ground and water sources. They grabbed people and livestock, tore their bellies open, and ripped off their heads. The class leader thought about it and nodded. It was unclear if she understood or not. That sounds like an avalanche caused by an earthquake, followed by a series of natural disasters. Wang didn't nod or shake her head. Later, the Hanga people decided to hide themselves and live deep within the mountains, not far from where Qingxi village is today. The ancient sky burial site fell into disuse after the Tibetans moved away. But after that great disaster, the sky burial master's little house became the place where the Hanga guarded the mountain. They believed one could see an impending disaster from high up, so every month they would send a strong young man to keep watch over the mountain. Gradually, the custom changed, and the person who kept watch over the mountain became the most respected person in the tribe. The mountain keeper's hut became his home, and in turn, the hut became a very sacred place to the Hanga. At some point, if there was a major sacrificial ritual, the tribe would climb the mountain together and come to the hut to participate. Little Glasses asked, "How come I've never heard of the Hanga tribe before?" The tribe was always very small, and no one ever married outside. It ceased to exist long ago, leaving no records behind. The students all understood at once. The boy, like a stick of bamboo, concluded, "Oh, I get it. There weren't many people, and they didn't marry outside the tribe, so hundreds of years of inbreeding caused their extinction." Wang just chuckled lightly. The class leader, sitting nearest to her, shivered. Once their curiosity was satisfied, Shun Wei urged all of the students to bed. The only people still up were Wang, who didn't need to sleep, and Daqing, who had stayed hidden during the day and was now coming to stand guard during the night. Shun Wei was the last one to lie down. He checked the windows and doors, then took out a roll of tape from somewhere and carefully covered all the gaps. He quietly reminded the students one by one to stay warm at night, then asked Wang if she needed another layer of clothing. He even lowered the flame to keep the water in the pot from boiling over. Having taken care of everything, he got settled in his own sleeping bag. During the history lecture, Zhao Yunlan had automatically blocked out the boring audio feed and gone to sleep, earbuds crammed into his ears. Now he was curled in a ball, head at a slight angle. One earbud had come a bit loose and was dangling from his ear. Zhao Yunlan's features were beautifully pronounced. He was vibrant when his eyes were open, but he was still pretty when they were closed. Only now he was pale from the cold, looking faintly worse for wear. Shun Wei's gaze drifted to his face. Zhao Yunlan slept calmly and peacefully, as though he'd still be able to find a corner to sleep in even if the sky fell. For some time, Shun Wei couldn't look away. He watched Zhao Yunlan quietly for a while, expression softening. He carefully removed Zhao Yunlan's earbuds, rolled them up, and set them aside. Then he turned the coat Zhao Yunlan had thrown aside and spread it over him. Changcheng and one student had already started snoring mildly, as if in harmony. The soft sounds of puttering about came from where Wang was tidying up the little stove. Shun Wei took a breath and lay on his side, his back turned to the group. Not long after that, his breathing slowed and steadied, as if he'd fallen asleep. But where no one else could see, his eyes were still open. In the faint light, his gaze stayed fixed on Zhao Yunlan, as if he were prepared to stare at Zhao Yunlan's sleeping countenance for the entire night. Shun Wei had been restraining himself for too long. In the perfect silence, he couldn't help letting go for once. Lying there with Zhao Yunlan so tantalizingly near, his thoughts spun out of control. It was overwhelming. He imagined gathering that warm body close, pressing kisses to those eyes, that hair, those lips, tasting and partaking of every part. He imagined possessing Zhao Yunlan utterly. The fantasy alone was enough to make Shun Wei's breathing unsteady. He yearned with the desperate fervor of someone dreaming of hot soup as they froze to death. But he didn't move a muscle. Just looking at Zhao Yunlan and thinking about him was seemingly enough. Dah-ching curled up next to Wang, his tail sweeping back and forth. Once it had grown even later, and he thought everyone was asleep, he asked quietly, "What exactly is buried in the garden? Corpses? Human heads? What kind of people are buried here?" Wang's plastic face was hidden within her hood. "Heads. Decapitation was customary among the Hanga." "How exactly did the tribe go extinct?" Wang paused. "Didn't that student say it was inbreeding?" "Don't try to fool me the same way you fooled those stupid kids. Even horses can avoid that problem. So eventually, even you stupid humans could figure it out." Daqing sniffled impatiently. "Besides, one husband having multiple wives is widely accepted among many ethnic minorities. The so-called not marrying outside just means that girls don't marry into other tribes, and men can't have women from other tribes as their primary wife. How could it be that strict? And it's not as if a tribe is only 2 or 3 families. There would have to be someone more than 5 degrees removed. You can't all be close relations." Wang looked down at him and stroked his head. "You're just a cat," she murmured. "You just need to eat your cat food and dried fish. Why are you thinking so much about human matters?" She looked like a young woman and had a voice of one, but there was no trace of youthful vigor in the way she spoke. She sounded very old and very weary. Dah-ching lay on the floor. Feline instinct made his eyes narrow in response to Wang comforting touch, but he didn't close them directly. Instead, he stared at a fixed spot and spaced out. The night deepened. Tranquility blanketed the little house on the mountaintop. Gradually, it emptied of all sound but soft, slow breathing and the chorus of snores. Chapter 20. Just past midnight, with no warning, Zhao Yunlan snapped awake. Suddenly, he was looking straight into Shun Wei's tender gaze, without even the barrier of glasses between them. Shun Wei looked away in a panic. Fortunately, Zhao Yunlan didn't notice. He sat up quietly, and after listening carefully for a moment, he pressed his index finger to his lips, signaling Shun Wei to keep quiet. Then he crawled out of his sleeping bag, picked up his flashlight, and headed outside. Dah-ching shot after him with a meow. Worried, Shun Wei got up too. As soon as he stepped out, Zhao Yunlan realized there was no need for a flashlight. In the distance, the entire valley was ablaze, as if fire had descended from heaven. On one side was the frozen mountain, crusted in ice and snow. On the other side, everything was burning. Here on the mountaintop, thousands of kilometers away, it was still as if they could hear pitiful screams from within the fire and feel the flames searing their skin. A whole expanse of sky was orange. "What is that?" Zhao Yunlan said. Daqing's fur was standing on end. It was as if they were no longer in the mortal realm at all. The valley's transformation into an inferno was a severe shock, enough to entrance anyone who saw it, distorting all sense of time and place. As if in response, tremors spread through the entire garden. The frozen ground cracked open all over, exposing the buried skulls, large and small, old and new, in an array of pale shades. A series of clattering noises, like bone on bone, left the skulls all facing in the same direction, as if someone had arranged them. More and more skulls surfaced, joining the others in their creepy, reverent stare in the direction of the fire. Shun Wei had followed them outside. Zhao Yunlan pushed Shun Wei behind him, then grabbed Dah-ching. "Fatty, don't run around." "That's hellfire." At some point, Wang had come up behind them. Her hood had fallen down, revealing the blow-up doll's lifeless face. Before Shun Wei could take a closer look, she tumbled softly to the ground. Shun Wei made an instinctive attempt to catch her, but as soon as he touched the doll's body, it let out an exaggerated fake moan. Oh God. That was enough of a shock to poor, gentlemanly Shen Laoshi that his hand shook, dropping the doll. A girl in a white dress materialized from the plastic husk. Wang Zheng's familiar voice said, "Sinners passing through hell's gates know that hellfire for them awaits. I've heard that the fire from hell only burns those who have sinned." Zhao Yunlan interrupted her angrily. "Keep that bullshit to yourself." Wang Zheng pointed. "Look if you don't believe me." Every single skull in the garden had turned around. In tidy formation, they peered toward the little wooden house. The sight of so many empty eye sockets was impossibly chilling. The skulls' mouths were open, jaws moving as if laughing. Suddenly, the cat wasn't the only one whose hair stood on end. Only Wang Zheng showed no reaction to the unusually lively skulls. "My tribesmen, they want to skin me, pluck my tendons, and drink my blood." Zhao Yunlan pulled a gun from his pocket and said evenly, "Wang Zheng, back in your body. Shun Wei, go back inside." Wang Zheng seemed dead set on mutiny today. She sighed as if she hadn't heard him. "Except I'm already dead," she said, bitterness seeping into her tone. "Are you menopausal or something? Stop blabbering and get the fuck back inside." Zhao Yunlan yanked her translucent soul out of the air and stuffed her roughly back into the doll. Zhu Hong had been startled awake and came to check on things, and Zhao Yunlan snatched the doll from the ground and flung it to Zhu Hong's arms. Mouths suddenly wide, the skulls made a sudden rush for the door. Zhao Yunlan grabbed the door bolt, brought his arms up, and fired 3 shots. The skulls that had been shot let out human screams and dissolved into white smoke. Zhao Yunlan seized the chance to get the door closed. One skull that had just hurled itself toward them got wedged between the door and the frame. Zhao Yunlan pulled a short knife from under his pant leg and brought the sheath violently down on the skull, which shattered like an eggshell. Zhao Yunlan slammed the door shut with a bang. The skulls outside rose up one after another, bumping into the door in a relentless symphony of rocks. They jumped up high, nearly able to peer in through the cracks in the window. A few students jolted awake, but they stayed perfectly calm as they saw what was happening. How could such a scene be anything but a dream? Even Changcheng was calm. After all, this tiny mountain hut contained the all-powerful Director Zhao, a large, fierce talking cat, a fake monk who was capable of defeating the hunger ghost with just a small bottle, a snake Yao who ate raw lamb slices, and Shuzhi, whom Changcheng was too afraid to speak to. In the face of what looked like horrible danger, Changcheng honestly thought it was quite safe. The poor kid had a lot of blind faith in his colleagues. Chapter 21. Amitabha. Jing rushed forward to help Zhao Yunlan hold the door closed. Staring at the jumping skulls outside the window, the fake monk panted, "I despair for this world when even skulls are pretending to be cute. What the hell is all of this?" Zhao Yunlan turned to Wang. "What the hell are those things coming after you? Okay, fine. They bite. But why do they bite you? Aren't you afraid of being poisoned from ingesting too much plastic?" Jing had a vague sense that Zhao Yunlan had let something slip. He gave his boss's shirt a subtle tug. The class leader overheard and snorted with laughter, then clapped a hand over her mouth at the other students' "now is not the time" expressions. "In 1712, there was an uprising within the Hanga tribe." With Zhu Hong's help, Wang got to her feet, pulling her hood up tightly. In the end, the rebels won. The man who had been chief died. His 3 wives, many children, and even the 112 brave warriors who followed him were all beheaded according to the old customs. Their bodies were burned, and their heads were buried in the mountain keeper's garden. They will be enslaved forever, bound to obey. They will never find peace. Zhu Hong froze. "The ones in the garden?" The knocking sound grew more and more insistent. Zhao Yunlan exchanged a glance with Shuzhi, who promptly unzipped his own windbreaker. The knit sweater he wore underneath was extremely peculiar. It had a seemingly endless number of pockets, making whoever wore it resemble a walking closet organizer. He felt through every pocket as if counting money until he found a stack of yellow paper talismans written in cinnabar. Shuzhi stuck a talisman on each corner of the door. As he applied each one, a faint white light shone around the yellow paper. Outside, things quieted down noticeably. From there, he began slapping talismans onto the windows and walls by the handful, like someone plastering ads on a lamppost. In short order, the place was thickly covered in talismans on every surface. The leaping skulls outside seemed to realize what they were up against. They all retreated a meter or two, now too afraid to bash into the wall or try to bite the windows. Zhao Yunlan finally let go of the window. Despite the freezing temperature, he'd broken out into a sweat. He sat by the little stove thinking, then tore open a bag of milk powder, which he poured into a large bowl with some water and then put in the boiling pot. He looked at Wang, who had just gotten up, and ordered, "Boil it. Make sure everyone drinks a bowl, and after that, you need to explain to the group exactly what's going on." "I'm sorry," was Wang's only answer. Her mouth may as well have been glued shut from all her willingness to reply. Backed into a corner, she seemed more willing to give herself up than explain. "Just open the door and throw me out. If I'm not in here, they won't bother you, no matter what happens outside." "Excuse me?" Zhao Yunlan asked. "Do you really think I'm the sort of person who'd do something like that?" Wang appearance might be terrifying, but she was a gentle ghost. She rarely spoke much, but she was always polite to everyone. Saying something so hurtful was very unusual for her. Feeling as though she'd lost her composure, she lowered her head and decided not to say anything else. Shuzhi cracked the window open and looked out, verifying that the skulls had all retreated from the charms inside the house. He gestured to Zhao Yunlan. "It's 3 hours until daybreak. My talismans should last for at least 5 hours. Leave someone to stand watch, and everyone else can get some sleep." "I can stand Wang began. Zhao Yunlan interrupted. "If something goes wrong, you won't be able to deal with it. I'll stand guard for the rest of the night." As he spoke, he pulled a windproof lighter from a pocket. "Girls, are you worried about secondhand smoke? If not, Mr. Police Officer here is going to find a cigarette to hook up with to stay awake." The students had suffered a huge fright without ever fully waking up. Hearing that, they all settled back into their sleeping bags. Soon the hut was quiet again. Other than the sound of the skulls rolling around in the snow outside, everyone's flashlights were turned off, leaving only the soft white light of the mess of talismans on the door and walls. Daqing closed his eyes, tucked into Zhao Yunlan's arms. Wang sat in a corner away from everyone else, lost in thought as she leaned against the wall. Zhao Yunlan took up a position next to the window. The tiny opening Shuzhi had made was letting in a small draft. He stood in that spot, covering the tiny crack with his back, and lit a cigarette. Shun Way silently came over and handed him a thick jacket. Zhao Yunlan accepted, wrapping it around himself and his cat. As Shun Way turned to leave, Zhao Yunlan spoke, too quietly for anyone else to hear. "Earlier, were you watching me?" Shun Way stopped in his tracks. When he'd been startled awake, Zhao Yunlan had seen how Shun Way was looking at him. It hadn't been the look of someone who'd just woken up, or someone lying awake because they couldn't sleep. Shun Wei's expression had been calm and content, something complex but gentle simmering in his gaze. Just seeing it made the heart clench. Zhao Yunlan had had the distinct feeling that those eyes had been focused on him, unblinking, for half the night. If the situation was that Shun Wei was simply deeply closeted, feeling something for him but too afraid to take the first step, well, that was perfectly normal. Zhao Yunlan was rather attractive, if he said so himself. He was financially secure, he didn't let his beastly temper show in front of just anyone, so he often gave the impression of having a great personality and being easy to talk to. With all that, he had always had good luck when it came to romance. But whether it was animal attraction or Zhao Yunlan's personal trait, or even love at first sight, would any of those really make someone lie awake all night long just to foolishly watch someone sleep? That had to be several lifetimes of entanglement, a love with deep, deep roots. "We knew each other before, didn't we?" Zhao Yunlan asked quietly. "You told me that you'd encountered me once during a case, but that wasn't all, was it?" It was possible that this Shen Lao-shi, with his excellent reputation and temperament, was actually a stalker who'd secretly been in love with Zhao Yunlan for a long time due to his good looks. But despite his limited self-awareness, Zhao Yunlan still figured that was basically impossible. In all honesty, it was more conceivable to imagine himself doing that to Shun Wei. The alternative was that Shun Wei was just a disguise concealing someone who wasn't an ordinary human at all. A disguise that could fool the entire SID. Shun Wei was facing the other direction. His back was so still that he seemed to have become part of the night. Zhao Yunlan's cigarette finally reached the end of its life. Distracted, he stubbed it out and rudely threw it out the window. It hit a jumping skull square in the forehead, and the white bone instantly turned black. The skull fell to the ground, twitched a few times, and stopped moving. "After we get back, can we meet up to talk?" Zhao Yunlan asked. Shun Wei said nothing for a long time. Just when Zhao Yunlan was resigning himself to not getting a response, a low voice came from the darkness. "All right." 3 or 4 hours passed very quickly. When the eastern sky was just starting to lighten, before the pale pre-dawn glow had properly arrived, the ghostly things in the garden had already calmed down. The unidentified eerie blaze in the distance had also vanished without a trace. It might have all been just a dream. Zhao Yunlan opened the door and personally went out into the garden to confirm that the sun was indeed rising and that dawn had arrived. Then he went back inside, rubbed his face tiredly, crossed his arms over his chest, and took a nap against the wall. Finally, at ease. First, he'd driven through the ice and snow for an entire day, and then his nerves had been stretched taut the whole night. So it might have been because he was too tired, but somehow Zhao Yunlan slept more deeply than he intended to. An hour or so later, Zhu Hong nudged him awake. Zhao Yunlan realized there was a blanket draped over him. If someone had thoughtfully tried to keep him warm, it was most likely Shun Way. Zhao Yunlan began half-consciously looking around for him, eyes still fogged with sleep. But before he could locate his target, Zhu Hong spoke. Her question landed like a blow, leaving him disoriented. "Director Zhao, do you know where Wang went?" "Wang Zheng?" Zhao Yunlan twitched and sat up, his head heavy. "I was asleep for less than an hour. Wasn't she just here?" Zhu Hong had known Zhao Yunlan for many years. No matter how tired he got, most of the time he only allowed himself to rest his eyes or doze lightly. Falling so deeply asleep out in the middle of nowhere while standing guard against a host of menacing skulls was wildly out of character for him. Not sweating the small stuff was one thing. Not having common sense was quite another. Zhu Hong leaned in close and inhaled deeply. "What?" Zhao Yunlan began. "Don't move." Zhu Hong took the blanket off him, holding it up by a corner. She took a close look through its fluff and then scraped up a trace of brown powder with her long nails. She looked up at Zhao Yunlan. "You've been tricked." He hunted fierce prey fearlessly, only to be bitten by his own hound. And what's more, it hadn't been Shun Wei who left the blanket. Irrational fury washed over him. "Get me a cold bottle," he told Zhu Hong quietly. "Cold water." "There's no hot water anyway." Zhu Hong returned with a bottle of water covered in frost crystals. Face set with determination, Zhao Yunlan took a few sips and then dumped the rest of water over his head. Zhu Hong and Shun Wei yelled at him simultaneously. "Are you crazy? What are you doing?" Shun Wei made as if to stop him, but he was too far away. He'd been assiduously avoiding Zhao Yunlan since he'd been caught watching him sleep. "Ling, stay here and take care of Shun Laosher and the others." Zhao Yunlan ignored everyone, his expression dark. Having rinsed his face with cold water, he wiped it carelessly with his sleeve. He shook out his wrinkled jacket and draped it over his shoulders before striding out, kicking a skull that was in his way. "Everyone else, with me." "What about the bones in the garden?" Ling asked hastily. Zhao Yunlan didn't even glance back. "Dig them up and smash them." Shocked, Ling asked, Won't that anger something?" "If no one bothers me, I won't drop a single cigarette on their land," Zhao Yunlan said coldly. "But if they come after me, I will absolutely dig up their ancestors' graves. Last night we came in politely, and this is how they respond. Now that it's daytime, the tables have turned. It's my time now, and I'm telling you to smash them all. I'll deal with any consequences." Zhao Yunlan had a bandit's temper. Once it erupted, he was ruthless. No one dared provoke him further. Ling wisely shut his mouth. Panting with effort, Zhu Hong had to jog to keep up with him. Finally, she mustered the courage to say quietly, "Wang probably has her reasons." "No shit," Zhao Yunlan shot back. "Do you have anything to say that's not useless? If not, shut up." Zhu Hong managed to hold her tongue for 2 seconds. "Can't you be civil? Do you normally talk like that when you're hitting on girls?" Zhao Yunlan finally glanced her way, only to provoke her further. "Do I look like I'm trying to hit on you?" She desperately wanted to slap him, but didn't dare. All she could do was lash out viciously. "No wonder you blow every relationship you ever have. I hope you die single." Moving fast, Zhao Yunlan led the team back to where they'd left the cars. He pulled a few backpacks from one trunk. "We can't drive the cars up there, so we'll go on foot from here. Take the calorie-dense food and the small water bottles out of the outside pockets and carry them all on you. Even if we get separated and you lose the backpacks, those should keep you going for a while in an emergency." He dug out a bunch more supplies. "And then there's these." He pushed them toward Zhu Hong. "Take all this back to the house and divide it among the others." Zhu Hong stared at him, taken aback. You're sending me back? Looking human doesn't make you warm-blooded. Zhao Yunlan closed the trunk impatiently and locked the car. He called for Chu Shuji and Guo Changcheng to follow him, then waved at Zhu Hong. Go on, woman, before you're frozen solid and have to hibernate. Hurry up and... All right, take this too. Warm it up before you drink it. He threw her a small bottle. Zhu Hong found herself holding a bottle of yellow rice wine. It had very low alcohol content and was ideal for warming someone up. It was produced in Yunlan and therefore hard to find in the Great Northwest. Zhao Yunlan had obviously packed it as part of his original preparations, and its small size clearly indicated who it was intended for. Zhu Hong pursed her lips, emotion flickering in her eyes. Zhao Yunlan had already wrangled the others and set off. To conserve energy, Zhao Yunlan and the other two didn't speak at all as they traveled. In a stroke of good luck, the sun was out. The wind was bitingly cold, but it was less bone-piercing in the sunlight. Guo Changcheng felt like they'd climbed at least 3 or 4 mountains. They had long since veered away from their original destination of Qingxi village. Sometime past noon, they finally reached a small mountain pass that sheltered them from the wind. By then, they were all nearly frozen solid. Chu Shuji ripped open a few packs of beef jerky and divided it between them. Then Zhao Yunlan dug out a map covered in markings and sat cross-legged on a rock to study it. Where exactly are we going? Chu Shuji asked. Do you have any idea? Zhao Yunlan made a new mark on the map. Without looking up, he said, that multi-ethnic region Wang mentioned is not where Qingxi village is now. To be honest, I thought that's what she meant at first. But then I looked through her file. This was a surprise to Chu Shuji. He'd been under the impression that Zhao Yunlan had been too blinded by lust recently to think of anything else. And here the boss had actually managed to get some work done. He asked the obvious question. What's up with her file? Wang is from the Hanga tribe. Her name used to be Yunlan. Wang is the name she gave herself the year she entered the Soul Guarding Order, Zhao Yunlan said. The Hanga weren't friendly or hospitable. Given how much they kept to themselves, they couldn't have lived in a place like Qingxi village, down on flat land where just anyone could pass by. Chu Shuji hadn't been expecting that either. There are actual historical records? Not exactly. Zhao Yunlan pointed to 3 spots on the map. It's in the Record of Ancient Sorcery. As he spoke, he spread the old map open and tapped a spot with his pen. Chu Shuji immediately recognized it as the location of the hut on the mountain. Zhao Yunlan continued. When I first went in, I thought the human heads in the yard were probably connected to the legendary Luo-bu-la curse of constraint. In the Hanga language, Luo-bu-la refers to the souls of the dead. In this case, constrained doesn't mean forbidden. It refers to imprisonment. He paused. Guo Changcheng, why are you all the way over there? Get your ass over here. You've passed your trial period, so as an official employee, can you be a little more engaged in your work? Guo Changcheng shuffled over with quick, small steps. In other words, Chu Shuji said, it means technique to imprison the souls of the dead. Since ancient times, it was the custom of the Hanga to behead people and command the souls of the dead, Zhao Yunlan said. I think that likely had to do with how their society was structured. Right up to their execution, the Hanga tribe always practiced slavery in some form. In the records of the Luo-bu-la curse, the Hanga believed they had absolute dominion over their slaves in life and death. So slaves who died would be beheaded and their heads sent to the sacrificial altar at the top of the mountain. Up there, their souls would be imprisoned using the forbidden technique, forcing them to serve even in death. Chu Shuji asked, why does it have to be at the altar? Is there significance to burying their heads at the mountaintop? Yes. The Hanga once lived among many other ethnic minorities. Even though they didn't marry outside of their tribe, it was inevitable that they were influenced by other religions. A small amount of what was passed down in the Hanga tribe contained the ideology of Ban, although, of course, the core values were different. You can also see echoes of other groups' malevolent deities among the gods worshipped by the Hanga. Footnote 34, Ban is a pre-Buddhism Tibetan religion. Back to the reading. Unlike Bon beliefs, they clearly didn't believe that all things had spirits, but they did believe that mountains had souls. Maybe because they lived in the mountains and were familiar with avalanches, they even believed that the souls of mountains were powerful enough to suppress the souls of the dead. So they erected this sacrificial altar at the opening of the mountain's soul, the side of the peak that doesn't face the light. At the same time, they were also influenced by the Buddhist belief in reincarnation. The Luo Bula curse was rooted in the belief that the 3 points of a triangle create the world's deepest well inside. Nothing within can escape its shackles. Chu Shuju was very sharp and caught on immediately. That means there should be 3 altars. They must be near each other and at a similar height above sea level, creating an equilateral triangle. Zhao Yunlan nodded. The 3 dots he'd drawn on the map formed a near-perfect equilateral triangle. He circled a spot in the triangle center, imprisoning the souls of the dead here, so that they can be ordered about for lifetime after lifetime. I think this must be where the Hanga lived. Let me see. Chu Shuju had excellent spatial perception and a sharp sense of direction. He rotated the map to study it. Look, isn't this the burning valley from last night? Then that should be it. Zhao Yunlan quickly stuffed a few beef jerky slices into his mouth. Hurry up and eat, and then we'll head off. Chu Shuju chewed the jerky thoughtfully. He was silent for a bit, then glanced at Changcheng, who wasn't following the conversation at all. After some consideration, he said, even though you said it was background research for the trip, you must have already had a certain degree of familiarity with sorcery to be able to put this all together so quickly, right? If you can't tell the difference between ecstasy and heroin, how can you be a drug enforcement officer? Zhao Yunlan said lightly. For once, Chu Shuju smiled, but bitterness was too entrenched in his appearance for any smile to really brighten his face. In that case, why don't we drug enforcement officers receive employee training? Zhao Yunlan's chewing slowed. He turned to stare at Chu Shuju, who blatantly stared back. Changcheng looked back and forth between them without a clue to what was going on. He was too afraid of both of them to ask. He could only shrink in on himself. Finally, Zhao Yunlan said, Lao Chu, you're smart. I've rarely met anyone smarter than you, so I'm not going to waste my breath. You know perfectly well why. Make of it what you will. Chu Shuju squinted at the beef jerky packaging for a while, as if it might hold the meaning of life. He didn't reply, and his expression didn't change. The entire conversation might never have happened. His thoughts were totally inscrutable. 15 minutes later, they set off again. This time, Chu Shuju took the lead. In the morning, the weather had been bright and sunny, but light snow had begun to fall at some point. The 3 headed west, winding down the mountain for nearly an hour, and then Changcheng glimpsed something in the snow that seemed very familiar. He darted over and wiped off the heavy layer of snow with his thick glove. He was astonished when he realized what it was. Zhao Yunlan only heard Changcheng scream and then start shouting, Director Zhao! Director Zhao, it's Wang Zheng's arm! Wang Zheng's! The kid really is a lucky charm. Zhao Yunlan thought as he headed over with ground-eating strides. He grabbed the plastic arm and rewarded Changcheng with a flick to the forehead. Wang Zheng's arm decomposed into dirt ages ago. This is the bottle leg product your dumbass bought. If this is here, where is the rest of her? Far too little snow had fallen to cover Wang Zheng's footsteps, no matter how light her current body was. Zhao Yunlan searched for a while, then had a thought. His eyes snapped up. If she hadn't walked this way, the arm might have fallen from somewhere above. Chu Shuju followed his gaze, then looked down at the map. He immediately put the pieces together. He patted Zhao Yunlan's shoulder and pointed upward. Look here. On a slope less than 3 meters away was a large cave, half covered by wild grass and white snow. It would ordinarily be well hidden, but the snow that had accumulated at its entrance showed signs of being walked on, which disrupted its camouflage enough to attract Chu Shuju's notice. Chapter 22. The friend Zhao Yunlan had consulted earlier eventually got in touch with Ling to say it would be at least 3 or 4 days before the roads could be cleared. Shun Way had a quick discussion with his students, reaching the unanimous conclusion that under such hard circumstances, even if there were survivors in Qingxi village, they probably wouldn't be in the mood to be interviewed. Shun Way made the executive decision that they would return to Dragon City with Zhao Yunlan and the others as soon as they got back. The class leader, in low spirits, heated some water and a small bottle of milk for Dah-ching as she prepared breakfast for everyone. At the professor's request, the other students were all helping Ling clear the yard. They approached it with a simple, crude method. Under Ling Jing's direction, they dug up every single skull that had tried to bite them in the night and placed them, one at a time, in a designated spot. Then the fake monk raised a huge rock and smashed each skull to smithereens. Zhu Hong came back carrying a bag taller than she was. After she put the supplies down, she warmed the yellow rice wine slightly in the pot and drank it all. Then she took over for Ling Jing, smashing skull after skull until the class leader called them in to eat breakfast. Something had clearly gotten into her. She aggressively shoved past the boy and Daqing, plopped down next to Shen Wei, and quite rudely said, "Chocolate sauce, please, Shen Lao Shi." She spread the chocolate sauce over the beef jerky, mixing sweet and savory together. It was hard to say what it might have tasted like. As she ate, she kept stealing glances at Shun Way, who seemed unbothered. After some thought, while putting on a show of meticulously applying the chocolate sauce, she spoke again without even looking up. "Our boss is pursuing you." Shun Way paused, then tilted his head to look at her. Still looking down, Zhu Hong casually added, as though they were just talking about the weather, "I assume you've noticed?" Shun Wei seemed to ignore the question. He just handed her a few more packets of chocolate sauce. "Do you want more?" Now Zhu Hong looked at him, and it was a strange look indeed. As Shun Wei watched, her ordinary round pupils slowly elongated into the vertical pupils of a cold-blooded animal. It was a tremendously creepy look on such a pretty face. But Shun Wei just turned his attention back to his food as if nothing had happened. "So, do you like him?" Zhu Hong asked quietly. Perfectly calm, Shun Wei asked her question with one of his own. "Why do you want to know?" I'm just gossiping." Zhu Hong made up an excuse. "Gossip is the right of every employee who's been exploited and oppressed." Shun Wei looked at her again with what could have been a smile. "If you're so fond of gossip, how can you not tell?" When Zhu Hong had no response, Shun Wei laughed softly and took the warmed milk off the stove using a napkin. "You're eating such dry things," he said. "Do you want to wash it down with a drink?" Zhu Hong's expression twisted. She was gripping the metal thermos in her hand tightly enough to accidentally dent it, but she managed to squeeze out a smile. "Sure, I'll have some. Thank you." Still acting as if nothing was wrong, Shun Wei poured her some milk. "Drink it while it's warm." The dent in Zhu Hong's thermos deepened. A smile seemed to flicker in Shun Wei's eyes. Just as he was about to put the bottle of milk back, something seemed to catch his attention. His head snapped toward the window. As he stared in the direction of the valley, his expression changed. Zhu Hong wasn't sure if she was being too sensitive, but there was something deeply unnerving about Shun Wei's sudden dark look. She instinctively wanted to edge away from him. But what did she have to fear from a weak, defenseless university professor? The sunlight hit Shun Wei's glasses. The reflection from his lenses was piercing. "I'm full," Zhu Hong heard him say. "I'll go clean up the garden. Students, don't run around and listen to the officers." Then he walked out alone. Somehow his words attracted no real attention from anyone. Even more bizarre, when everyone had finished eating and went out to stretch their legs in the garden, no one had noticed that Shun Wei had disappeared. It was as if he had never existed at all. No one, including Zhu Hong and Ling, remembered that there should have been another person with them. 10 minutes later, the missing professor materialized out of thin air in the spot where Zhao Yunlan and the others had found Wang Zheng's plastic arm. He wasn't even wearing a jacket. The north wind swept through the mountains and disturbed his hair and shirt, leaving snow behind on his glasses. Shen Wei stood under the mountain slope and surveyed his surroundings. He suddenly extended an arm, palm down, and made a grabbing motion. His hand was deathly pale. Blue veins were clearly visible through his skin, as if he were an incredibly detailed recreation of a person. Following his movement, the ground trembled. The wind between the mountains grew fiercer and fiercer. It howled as it began spinning into a vortex, slashing toward the clouds like a blade. With his hands still in the air, Shun Way peeled back the ground surface, revealing the chapped, frozen earth beneath the heavy snow. It was then that something crawled up out of the ground and flung itself straight at Shun Wei's back. Arrow swift, it hurtled toward its defenseless-looking target. A smell started to permeate the air, the stench of rot mixed with a floral fragrance. In a heartbeat, Shun Wei had already pivoted and clamped a hand around his would-be attacker's neck. The thing he had grabbed was a Yo-chu. Pure aggression flooded Shun Wei's gentle, handsome face. The Yo-chu struggled feebly. Gurgling noises came from its throat. "Rules are rules," Shun Wei said mildly. "Your kind brazenly crossed the boundaries and left the forbidden area without permission. The penalty is death." The Yo-chu's feet could no longer touch the ground. It kept struggling, writhing like a fish out of water. Its twitching hands came up in a vain attempt to pry Shun Wei's hand off its neck. Shun Wei's fingers tightened. The Yo-chu in his grip jerked violently a few times and stopped moving, turning rigid. He casually tossed the corpse aside. The instant it touched the snowy ground, it vanished. In its place, a strange flower emerged into the frozen ground. Shun Wei ground it underfoot. With a crack, the delicate flower stem snapped in two. He pointed at the ground, and an indistinct black line began to snake its way across the ground, following the faint footprints that ascended the mountain and disappeared into a cave halfway up. There was a much louder crack. Shun Wei's gaze flashed, and as if frozen, the black line on the ground shattered. A sharp scream rang out in the distance, and 7 or 8 Yo-chu burst out from the ground. Unlike the ones Zhao Yunlan had seen on the roof, these each stood 3 meters tall and had blood-red eyes. In unison, they roared at the sky. The mountain, which had so recently suffered an avalanche, was shaking again. "Puppet," Shun Wei called. A small gray puff of mist emerged by his feet and rubbed affectionately against his pant leg. When Shun Wei tapped it with a toe, it soared into the air and into the cave. Next, a pitch-black sword shot out of Shun Wei's hand. The blade was 3 kun long, and its spine was unusually thick. It seemed to reflect no light at all, other than the finest thread of snow-bright light along its edge, a light that only the souls that died by the blade were doomed to see. Shun Wei moved. Within a single breath, the Yo-chu's head and their roars were cut off. Their massive bodies crashed to the ground, only for another group of Yo-chu to emerge, like the wild grass that grew again and again when the spring breeze blew. These were even taller. It seemed like the adversary would stop at nothing to delay him. Zhao Yunlan and the others had already been in the cave for quite a while. It had seemed normal enough at first, but the deeper they went, the deeper the darkness became. After turning a corner, they were well and truly out of light, forcing Zhao Yunlan to turn on his flashlight. After another 100 meters or so, the path ended at a large door. The flashlight's illumination wasn't enough to determine what the door was made of beyond probably some ancient alloy. It was covered in rust spots. One open-mouthed skull hung above and on each side of the door, and there was an inverted triangle over it. A triangle? The Luo-bu-la curse again? Chu Shuju put on gloves and moved closer. First, he very carefully ran his fingers over the door's surface, and then he pressed his ear against it, and not lightly. Some of it is hollow and some is solid, he reported. There should be some sort of mechanism, but it's not complicated. Let me study it for a second. Zhao Yunlan gave Guo Changcheng a kick in the butt. Go closer. Learn from your Chuge. Guo Changcheng shuffled closer. The fact was that Chu Shuju looked down on him in the way so many arrogant, smart people look down on dumbasses. But their boss's presence meant that Chu Shuju had no choice but to dutifully explain as he fiddled around. It's nothing impressive. The thought process that goes into things like this tend to be similar. So, after you've seen enough of them, it'll all fall into place for you. As he spoke, he took another small flashlight from his pocket and shined it through the crack in the door, then quickly looked the door over again from top to bottom. By this point, he had a pretty good idea of what was going on. There's one thick post and 35 thin posts inside. That's 36 altogether, a multiple of 6. With this kind of thing, the interior is usually all connected. He gestured toward Guo Changcheng with his chin. Squat down. I can't reach the top, so let me stand on your shoulders. Like some sort of large dog, Guo Changcheng squatted down at once. Chu Shuju didn't even try to be polite about it. Stepping on Guo Changcheng, he began knocking along the door, following the edge of the triangle and the barely visible crack. It was no easy task to support a grown man's weight. Chu Shuju's skinniness was outweighed by Guo Changcheng's uselessness. In no time, Guo Changcheng started shaking, but he gritted his teeth and held on. Sheer fear of letting the man on his back fall kept him from moving. Just as Guo Changcheng was starting to think he'd already been squashed flat, Chu Shuju jumped down and said, There are 36 metal posts behind the door. The mechanism inside means that the hollow spots are made of a different material, so the density is different too. If your hearing is sensitive enough, you'll be able to tell them apart. Guo Changcheng was still on the ground, mouth half open. He couldn't concentrate on anything but catching his breath, and Chu Shuju's explanation flew completely over his head. Chu Shuju spared him one glance before ignoring him completely. He continued as if addressing Zhao Yunlan, who was standing close behind him. Once you figure out the basic structure, all that's left to do is to deduce the details of what's going on inside there based on experience. Having said that, Chu Shuju reached up and dug his fingers into the center of the triangle. To Guo Changcheng's astonishment and fright, a hole was suddenly revealed. Still on his butt, he scuttled backward. Chu Shuju reached inside and felt around for a while, then turned back. There are 36 hidden posts arranged in a circle. I'm guessing you can only pull on 3. Which 3 do you think, Director Zhao? South, northwest, and northeast. Zhao Yunlan didn't hesitate at all. At last, Guo Changcheng felt like he could contribute something. Northeast, never eat soggy waffles? He offered. Chu Shuju and Zhao Yunlan ignored him in perfect unison. Guo Changcheng's tiny sprout of confidence was crushed on the spot, leaving him too nervous to make a peep. Then there was a heavy pressure on his head as Zhao Yunlan pressed down on him, forcing him to look up. The flashlight's beam circled the large metal door and stopped on the left side. What's that? Mountains? Guo Changcheng said. Zhao Yunlan firmly turned Guo Changcheng's head to the right and pointed at the carving on the right-hand side of the door. And what's that? Waves? Water? The Hanga tribe lived facing the water, with their backs to the mountain, from halfway up the main peak all the way down to the valley. I told you that just now, dumbass. Since this area is long and narrow, it was difficult for people to differentiate north, south, east, and west. Instead, they thought in terms of up, down, left, right, forward, and backward. Up is the direction of the mountain, and the main peak to the south. Down is the direction of the water, so that's north. The carving of a mountain indicates south, and the carving of the water indicates north. Soggy waffles, my ass. Zhao Yunlan tousled Guo Changcheng's hair roughly and delivered a harsh verdict. Even pigs are smarter than you, comrade. Guo Changcheng couldn't even defend himself. While they were speaking, Shuzhi had pressed down a few times beside the hole. There was a light scraping of metal against metal as the large door slowly opened in front of them. They were greeted by a damp, rotting smell. I'll go first. Xiao Guo, follow me, and Lao Chu, bring up the rear. Zhao Yunlan took a few steps, thought of something, and took an extra gun from under his pant leg. To Guo Changcheng, he said, "Did you pass your fire qualification exam?" Guo Changcheng looked at the ground, ashamed. The examiner said he wouldn't pass me unless he died and came back to life. Zhao Yunlan could only sigh. What about knives? Do you know how to use those? His head hung even lower. Perhaps? At Shuzhi's mocking laugh, he panicked even more. I hired a world peace ambassador. Zhao Yunlan gave the seemingly endless cave a worried glance. Left with no other choice, he reached into his pants pocket and pulled out a pocket-sized stun baton, throwing it to Guo Changcheng. As if teaching a child who just learned to walk how to wipe his butt, he spoke slowly, if impatiently. Look, hold that. It's very simple. Hold it like that. That's all you need to do. When you encounter something dangerous, just hold it in front of yourself. As long as you don't freeze in terror, you'll be okay. You can handle that, right? Guo Changcheng swung the baton-like thing. Nothing happened. It was like a little flashlight. Of course, it never crossed his mind that his boss might be messing with him. Instead, he assumed he was too dense to understand Director Zhao's explanation. Guo Changcheng had always been the biggest critic of his own intellect, but Zhao Yunlan didn't seem inclined to go over it again. After his cursory explanation, he'd set off into the cave with his flashlight, forcing Guo Changcheng to jog to keep up. Guo Changcheng didn't know whether to ask questions or just keep quiet. Common sense told him not to enter a dangerous situation without fully understanding something, but as he looked at Zhao Yunlan's towering back, all he could think was that if he asked, his boss would absolutely curse him to hell and back. The mere thought of Zhao Yunlan's anger inspired pure terror. As the feeling washed over him, a blinding spark shot out the little baton with no warning, heading straight for Zhao Yunlan's back. Fortunately, Zhao Yunlan was on the edge and alert. At the unexpected noise, he threw himself to one side. That scorching hot spark shot farther into the cave. Again in perfect unison, Shuzhi and Zhao Yunlan exclaimed, "Holy shit!" Shuzhi looked at Guo Changcheng in awe. This useless piece of trash had actually done something that most SID employees didn't even dare contemplate. Fucking up their asshole leader. Thoroughly disheveled, Zhao Yunlan wiped away the water and mud that the cave wall had left on him. What the fuck do you think you're doing? I don't know, Guo Changcheng yelped. It just suddenly went off. No shit. That thing's powered by your fear. The more afraid you are, the more powerful it is. It's practically custom made for you. Zhao Yunlan was half out of his mind. You're just walking. What could you possibly have been imagining while staring at my back that would scare you that much? There was an awkward silence. Finally, Guo Changcheng raised a shaking hand and pointed at the furious Zhao Yunlan. You right now. Zhao Yunlan was stunned to speechlessness. That was more than Shuzhi could handle. He laughed out loud and reached toward Guo Changcheng. Let me see that. Shuzhi, usually so cold and arrogant, had actually deigned to speak to him. Overwhelmed by attention, Guo Changcheng immediately handed his weapon over. Shuzhi shook it next to his ear, then rapped on it with his fingers. Having clearly reached some conclusion, he threw it back to Changcheng and shot Zhao Yunlan a meaningful glance. Director Zhao, this isn't quite legal, is it? It was Zhao Yunlan's turn to laugh. Don't give me that law-abiding citizen act. Watch out! He shoved Changcheng to the side and dropped down to one knee. There was a loud noise, and a fierce wind blew past his scalp, carrying a rancid smell. Something huge and comb-like flew at them. The thing's base was carved from thick, heavy wood over 3 meters long, and it was bristling with sharp blades. If it so much as touched a human, there'd be nothing left of them but a heap of minced meat. Shuzhi stood plastered to the wall. With a flick, a stack of paper talismans appeared in his hand. The giant comb turned in mid-air and came hurtling back at them from above. The paper talismans whipped from Shuzhi's hand like flying darts and stuck to the many blades. It seemed he might have chosen the wrong talismans. For whatever reason, the thing wasn't affected at all. Its downward slice continued with a gut-churning wind. Zhao Yunlan's gun was already settled in his hand. But then Changcheng, always a beat behind everyone else, suddenly reacted. A blood-curdling scream exploded out of him. "Mommy!" His wail was immediately followed by a roaring blaze, a full 2 or 3 meters high, surging out of the little baton he held. It was akin to a gas explosion. Zhao Yunlan and Shuzhi dove out of the way as the raging flames struck dozens of blades. The comb overhead came to a complete stop. It gave a violent shudder and then succumbed to the fire, melting into a soup that splashed the ground, sizzling as it fell. For a full minute, no one spoke. Eventually, Shuzhi stiffly turned his head to look at Changcheng, who was sitting on the ground. With utter sincerity from the bottom of his heart, he said, "Damn." Changcheng was too scared to do anything but sit there, his mind completely blank. "I thought you just sealed an earthbound spirit into a regular baton. Resentful spirits and little ghosts feed on fear and turn it into their own energy," Shuzhi said to their boss. What exactly did you make?" Zhao Yunlan straightened his clothes. It was his turn to play the law-abiding citizen. "Sealing a soul is illegal. As a trusted servant of the people, how could I knowingly commit a crime?" Shuzhi waited. Instead, it contained scraps of souls from 100 beheaded evil spirits. I got most of them from the soul executing amixy and acquired some from reapers using spirit money. Then I mixed the scraps with true flame of samadhi. Footnote 35, samadhi, hope I'm saying that right, a fictional extinguishable flame. Returning to the reading. Shuzhi was on the brink of complete breakdown. "Where did the fire come from?" "Last year when we went to capture that Wahng that escaped, I borrowed some fire from it to light a cigarette. I saved a spark." Footnote 36. The Wahng is an auspicious bird from Chinese mythology. It's described to look as a one-legged, crane-like green bird with red markings and a white beak, and warns that the Wahng may carry dangerous fire. Returning to the reading. There was nothing Shuzhi could say to that. He had a thug of a boss who straddled the line between dark and light, and who was bros with everyone in the 3 realms. He had to admit there might be no hope of his long-cherished wish, beating Zhao Yunlan up, coming true. Zhao Yunlan was about to warn them to be careful when a distant whistling began. A glowing gray mist drifted over, settling into Zhao Yunlan's arms. The light and mist vanished the moment they touched him, and a letter appeared in his hand. It was in a pitch-black envelope and blood-red writing and a familiar scent. Shuzhi's expression turned serious. He'd just started to step forward, but now quickly retracted that half-step. Meanwhile, Zhao Yunlan moved forward to put himself further away from Guo Changcheng and the possibility of more friendly fire. Behind him, Chu Shuja asked, "The soul executing emissary?" "Mm-hmm." Zhao Yunlan ripped open the envelope only to stare in concern at the contents. The soul executing emissary had always been a wordy writer. He was incapable of getting to the point without a polite preface, all but inquiring after the health of every one of Zhao Yunlan's aunts. Only after all that preamble would he address the topic at hand, and that would be concise, demonstrating his grace when it came to complex matters. This letter, on the other hand, was clearly rushed, with no introduction or conclusion. It was terse enough that it could have been a sticky note. "Danger. Do not give chase. Hurry back." Chu Shuja craned his neck. Why would the emissary send a letter here? What happened? Zhao Yunlan folded the letter and stuffed it into his pocket, thinking things over. The emissary usually sent his lone wolf notices to the SID office. If there wasn't a genuine emergency, he wouldn't have tracked them down out here. After all, he didn't want to be seen by unrelated parties. Why did he suddenly... And how did he know where Zhao Yunlan was? Zhao Yunlan hesitated for a moment, looked at his confused subordinates, and then said, "Lao Chu, take him back first. Meet up with Ling, Jing, and the others." "Why?" Chu Shuja asked. "Are we not going to find Wang Zheng? Guo Changcheng questioned. "I can do that on my own. You two head back." Zhao Yunlan patted Guo Changcheng's shoulder. "Hold on to the thing I gave you and be careful on your way. Once you get back to the others, help Ling Jing destroy that sacrificial altar. Don't let Shun Wei and his students run around. Wait until the rescue team clears the roads." Even though Zhao Yunlan hadn't revealed anything, Chu Shuja still felt a little uneasy. "You're continuing by yourself?" Zhao Yunlan nodded and said nothing else. Chu Shuja's brow creased. Then he pulled decisively on Guo Changcheng, who still wanted to say something. "Let's go." But what? Don't waste time. The boss wants to wrap this up so he can go back to his romance. Hurry up." Even as Chu Shuja dragged him back to the cave's entrance, Guo Changcheng kept looking worriedly back at Zhao Yunlan. Zhao Yunlan had his flashlight tucked into the crook of his elbow. His hands, in their leather gloves, were shoved into his jacket pockets. He stood and watched his subordinates until they were out of sight, before he turned to continue deeper into the cave. The gray shadow that had dissipated earlier came back out of nowhere. It coalesced into a little skeleton the height of a 4- or 5-year-old child. Standing in front, staring up at him, it extended its thin, white arms to block his way. "Oh, there are puppets this small. Did the soul-executing emissary send you to follow me?" Zhao Yunlan raised a brow. "I've got things to do. Move." It might only have been the puppet's size that gave this impression, but there seemed to be a childlike innocence in the dark holes of its eye sockets. It didn't appear to understand human language, as it didn't nod or shake its head. It just stood there, not letting him pass. Zhao Yunlan rubbed his chin. He was a bit surprised that the soul-executing emissary, who spoke so little, understood him so well. If a large puppet had tried to pull this stunt, he probably would have kicked it to pieces on the spot. But he couldn't quite bring himself to harm this tiny, thin-boned creature that couldn't even communicate. "Are you going to move or not?" he asked. The puppet's jaw moved with a crackling noise. Zhao Yunlan shook his head and took a large step. His long legs carried him effortlessly over the little skeleton, and he continued on his way. The poor thing clearly didn't understand what had just happened. It craned its neck so far to see what he was doing that its head nearly fell off. After a fierce struggle to maintain its balance, it rushed after him. As soon as it caught up, it grabbed the corner of his shirt and refused to let go. Zhao Yunlan didn't bother wasting his breath. He just kept walking, dragging the little skeleton along. It wasn't as if it was heavy. The skeleton puppet would have been crying its eyes out by then, if it had any. The farther he got, the heavier the stench of decay became. The air grew more and more humid. The ancient, well-worn stairs narrowed as they descended. By the time they reached the bottom, Zhao Yunlan felt like the little skeleton was getting in the way. He bent down and picked it up, carrying it on his shoulders like a child. Then he checked his watch. Clarity's watch plate seemed eerily quiet. After staring at it for a few seconds, Zhao Yunlan realized its hands had started moving backward, or at least one of them had. The second hand was moving in reverse, but the minute hand was moving forward and the hour hand was stuck at 12 o'clock. Some strange force seemed to be bringing the three hands together. When they finally converged at 12 o'clock, they stayed there as if dead. Zhao Yunlan scraped a bit of the mud from the wall and brought it to his nose. "It might just be my imagination," he said, calling to himself or maybe to the little puppet on his shoulders, "but I feel like I'm already dead and buried." The little puppet made a cracking noise. It suddenly extended a sharp finger and poked the side of Zhao Yunlan's face lightly. Then it pointed at the nearby wall and made a few more cracking sounds. Zhao Yunlan aimed his flashlight in the direction the finger was pointing. A line of text was illuminated. "You may not have eyes, but you sure can see. Good catch. This is in the Hanga language." He drew closer and touched it gently. "Well, strictly speaking, the Hanga didn't have their own writing. I'd say this is a special incantation." The little puppet cracked once more. "Don't ask me. I'm not a walking power word dictionary. Who the fuck knows what it means?" Half to himself, Zhao Yunlan said, "But I know that in Hanga culture, smooth curved lines represents gentle, peaceful things, and hard angle symbols rarely mean anything good. For example, the souls of the dead were imprisoned by a triangle, and that octagon I haven't had time to look into." His fingers paused. The line of text ended in an octagon. "This one right here," he said. "Great. Here comes the scary stuff." A huge noise cut him off. The entire cave began shaking, nearly knocking him off his feet. The little puppet grabbed his collar and buried its long, thin fingers into his hair. Zhao Yunlan squinted and saw a stream of fire racing toward him, whistling. He held on to the wall, hugging the little puppet with one arm. His face was red from the reflection of the flames. But while the leaping fire was also reflected in his pitch-black pupils, there was something icy in how they shone. Zhao Yunlan patted the little puppet, who was desperately trying to burrow into his arms. "Stop pulling at my clothes. If you're afraid, hide inside my watch." Fear had long since driven its master's task from the puppet's mind. Terrified, it turned into a gray mist and fled into the watch. A moment later, the fire washed over Zhao Yunlan, who had nowhere to run. He already had a talisman in his hand, but despite the roaring flames around him, the talisman didn't ignite, nor did he feel any heat. Zhao Yunlan froze and looked up from within the fire. It towered over him, filling his vision with aggressive flames that swept through the entire cavern. Suddenly, the intangible flames disappeared. With no help from him, the mud on the wall inscribed with the octagon crumbled and flaked off. Something occurred to him. He caught the flaking mud, and larger chunks began to fall. Zhao Yunlan swept some of it away and, with the help of his flashlight, made out a faint mural. With the passage of time, the revealed art had largely rotted away, and whatever it was expressing was extremely abstract. An archaeologist might have understood it, but it was beyond Zhao Yunlan, even if he'd examined it up close for long enough to risk damaging his vision. He quickly lost interest and started to move on, only to immediately stop again as the thought struck him. He turned back and studied the mural carefully from 5 steps away. The flashlight's beam slid across the surface, tilted upward 45 degrees to the 3 o'clock position, then tilted down 45 degrees. There was a huge octagonal shape on the mural, with a tiny octagon at each of its 8 points. Zhao Yunlan looked at the shape that had been hidden within the mural. He patted down his chest, then pulled a wallet from his jacket's inner pocket. And among the change and bank receipts was a piece of wrinkled yellowing paper with curling edges, torn out of an old book. In fact, it was the page from the Record of Ancient Sorcery that described the Luo-Bula curse. He'd had it on him all along, but it wasn't exactly something he could have shown Chu Shuzhi. The page was illustrated with a fanged monster. It had 6 arms but only 2 legs, each limb pointing at a point of an octagon. It looked ferocious, with the mouth wide open in anger. The small mountain was depicted in its mouth, and there was a pitch-black octagon on the left side of its chest. The mountain is in its mouth, and this thing is at its heart, Zhao Yunlan muttered. He slapped the large map he was carrying against the wall. Placing the illustration of the monster against it, he slowly rotated the map until south was facing up. Marking a line with his nails, he connected the mountain in the monster's mouth with the octagon on its chest and extended the line in both directions. His fingers landed in the most concave area of the valley. The huge fire in the valley, the skulls at the peak of the mountain, the many restricted techniques of a long extinct tribe. There seemed to be a deeper layer of secrets beneath everything. Why had Wang suddenly abandoned her companions and come here all by herself? Why was she so adamant about her remains, which had already been buried for hundreds of years? Zhao Yunlan was getting a bad feeling. He started moving again, going deeper and deeper into the cave. It kept narrowing around him until he could barely raise his head. By the time he reached the end, his back was almost in open rebellion. He was confronted by another speckled door. It depicted a terrifying, awe-inspiring monster with 6 arms and 2 legs, almost identical to the one on the page he was carrying. The only difference was that this one's expression seemed fearful. The instant his hand touched the door, his chest tightened. He shoved the door open and found himself standing halfway up the other side of the mountain. Right below him was that mysterious valley. He suddenly felt like he was standing in the middle of a roaring ocean. Seawater was battering him in the chest, pressing against him with tremendous weight until he couldn't breathe. It was clearly still daytime, but the sun was covered in such dense layers of clouds that not even a thread of sunlight could peek through. Zhao Yunlan walked forward. His first step seemed to set something off. A silent sigh came from the depths of the earth, like water ripples spreading in circles from the Hanga tribe's back mountain. There was something in this valley, something terrible and great. Zhao Yunlan continued toward the valley. The air grew thinner and thinner, increasing the sensation of pressure in his chest. His temples felt like something was clamping down on them. His pulse pounded in his ears, and his vision started to dim. Slowly, he adjusted his breathing. Breathing too heavily would exhaust him too quickly. He pinched his palm. A peculiar feeling was stirring in his heart. If there was something Wang couldn't let go of after all this time, even after becoming a ghost, it definitely wasn't her corpse, which had been reduced to bone long ago. It was this. The little puppet's head suddenly poked up out of his watch. Its jaw clicked randomly. Whatever it was trying to tell him, it was clearly a scaredy cat. It wanted to stop him, but was too afraid to come out of the watch. Zhao Yunlan just pressed it back inside. His expression grew more solemn as he continued under the immense pressure. He pulled 3 yellow talismans from his chest pocket. These 3 were different from the others. The corner of each one read Soul Guarding Order in tiny script written in cinnabar. If the black cat had been there, he would have recognized the legendary Soul Guarding Order. Zhao Yunlan didn't seem to be doing anything, but every 3 steps, a Soul Guarding Order ignited in his hand. When the last one had burnt to nothing, 3 whip cracks sounded. From thin air, a long whip appeared in his hand. The whip extended as if it were alive, pulling him forward until he caught sight of a white shadow about to melt under the daylight. Grim-faced, he flicked his wrist and sent the long whip lashing in that direction. It coiled around the white shadow and dragged it to him. Wang Zheng's plastic body was long gone. Her soul had been horrifically weakened, but her eyes were still open. She looked at him with the calm of someone about to die. "You've completely lost your mind." Zhao Yunlan caught hold of her and shoved her into his watch, cursing. His heart hurt like hell. It felt like it was about to explode from pain. This fucking place. Having found Wang Zheng, he meant to leave immediately, but something seemed to call to him. His eyes were drawn to where she had been standing. A huge stone pillar stood there, dozens of meters tall. It was blacker than night, wide at the top and narrow at the bottom, like a huge wedge nailed into the ground. Its base was a dilapidated sacrificial altar. The altar stone had been covered in Hanga curses, and below it there was an offering table laden with bloody sacrifices. The sacrifices looked for all the world as if they had just been placed there. The instant Zhao Yunlan's gaze fell on that giant stone, countless faces appeared on it, a dense tapestry of them, every single one shrieking in agony. The sound stabbed into his ears. It was a chorus of absolute human suffering, screamed in unison by thousands upon thousands of people. A weight like a massive rock pressed down on Zhao Yunlan's chest. There was a buzzing in his ears, and excruciating pain rapidly spread through his entire body. He leaned down to vomit a mouthful of blood and couldn't straighten up again. Knees buckling under the pain, he fell backward, and for a few seconds he couldn't see or hear. "I can't pass out here." Hands sticky with blood, he made a decisive grab for the knife sheathed to his calf, then aimed the knife for his own palm. As the blade descended, an icy hand grabbed it by the hilt. Someone's arm closed around him from behind, dragging him into an embrace. Through the reek of blood, he smelled something familiar. It was the light, chilly fragrance that came from the end of the Huangquan. The soul-executing emissary? The knife in Zhao Yunlan's hand clattered to the ground. He relaxed, passing out completely. Whew, okay. I decided to read that last chapter because I wanted to make the video longer, but I didn't expect it to go over 2 hours. So sorry, you guys, but nevertheless, we've done it. Okay. I literally only have 4 things to say. The first thing I want to say is that one of the things mentioned was a coincidence. On a couple of occasions, things have just been seeming very coinkydinky. And so I feel like it's been a minute throughout this entire book, at least. I don't think I've shared with you all any like Chinese lessons at all to say anything. And so I wanted to tell you what coincidence was in Mandarin, which is 巧合. And I know one of the ways you can say like what a coincidence, there is multiple ways. And you guys, I'm not fluent in Mandarin. So if there are better ways and you know, just put them in the comments because I'd love to know. But one way I've seen it before is like Juma Chao, which Juma is basically like, you know, this coincidence, like such a coincidence. So yeah, that's just one way. The next thing I want to say is I've just been having questions about Shun Way because we already know he's a mystery, right? Yes, of course. But there have been so many instances in which Priest has described his facial expression as cold, hardened, he's had murderous intent and stuff like that. And so I'm like, okay, why are these moments happening? Who is he? What is he? And why is he having these moments of murderous intent? You know, I'm like, who the hell are you? But now, well, I guess that question may have been answered. Can there be more than one soul emissary executive person thingy-bobber? What was it? Soul executing emissary. Yeah. Could there be more than one? And is he one? Because of, you know, how he disappeared and all that crap. And that little ghost, I'm sure, was definitely sent by him. Anyway, I just need to know. I think out of everything that I've read in these chapters, that is the thing that I want to know the most, which is really sad. So that brings me to my next point. On page 266, we have that chapter, basically, what chapter was it? Chapter 19, where Wang was explaining, the history of the Hanga people and everything. And on page 266, it says, during the history lecture, Zhao Yunlan had automatically blocked out the boring audio feed and gone to sleep. And I want to say, the description of that was the most freaking accurate thing ever. Boring audio feed is exactly how I felt when reading about the history of the Hanga people. And I'm not gonna lie, I got tired of voicing Wang, and I was like, can she please stop talking now? Because I am not interested at all. And like, don't get me wrong, I know that, like in a lot of danmei, we do side stories, they like a lot of times they'll show the side story of like a villain or something. I mean, their backstory, or we might get a little history or whatever. And sometimes those things can feel long. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I just want to hurry and get past it. But I'm still reading, intrigued somewhat. And then later on, I'm like, I'm glad that I made it through. This is the most freaking bored I have ever been reading any book for entertainment. I was so bored, and I didn't give I'm sorry, I was trying not to cuss. I don't know what my brain is thinking. I didn't give two craps about Wang Zheng's people's history at all. It was so boring. And even after the comment on page 266, it kept going. And I was just like, kill me now. Wang Zheng, you asked him to offer you up to the skull so they could just murk you off. And I'm like, please, send me. I'll go. Also, I can't believe I just said that. That's definitely a biblical reference. Send me, I'll go. But anyway, it was awful. So awful. I'm not even gonna front with you guys. Look, okay. We are on page, this chapter 23 is what's coming next. And that is page 308. Let me see how many pages we have left. Basically 70. Okay. So I'm gonna just say this, you guys. I don't think that this is a bad book. And I'm not talking about the series because I haven't read the entire series. I guess I can say the series. I don't think this is a bad book. I think it's not for me. I don't care about this genre. And I don't care about the dynamic between any of the characters at all. Like, not the relationship between Zhao Yunlan and Shen Wei, not the relationship between Zhao Yunlan and Changcheng, or Chu Shuzhi, who kind of just eventually came out of nowhere, and Changcheng, or Ling and Zhao Yunlan, or Shun Way and his students. Like, I don't care about any of the characters. At one point, I was like, okay, I do like Changcheng, he's an interesting character. But even in these chapters, I was like, I don't like Changcheng anymore. I don't like anyone. There's no character that is pulling me in, that I'm drawn to, that makes me want to know, like, okay, what's this? The only thing that I can say is because of the way this end of the chapter ended, when it comes to this soul executing emissary, I definitely don't think it's the one that he's thinking of. And there clearly has to be a second one. And it clearly has to be Shun Way. And so now with that piece of information, I'm kind of like, ooh, well, I want to know what happens next. But at the same time, I don't like this. I don't like this danmei series. And with that being said, I'm still leaving things out, in the open, because I'm going to finish this book. We have 70 pages left. I can force myself to read 70 more pages. But unless something really just moves me in those last 70 pages, I'm not going to continue this series. So I'm just letting you guys know that right now. I don't do anything for the views. Like, yes, I started this YouTube channel, and yes, views, nice, fun, sure. But I'm doing this because I enjoy it, and I was just like, I enjoy reading Danmei. Why not just easily record myself and share it with other people? That's all I care about. So if there's something I don't like, I am not against DNFing it at all. I'm going to DNF this one, more than likely. That's how I feel. And again, not because I think it's bad, but because I don't like this genre. I don't care about the plot and these otherworldly things that are going on. And it's strange because I feel like I said before, I might actually enjoy it if it was just like a TV show. Yes, I know it's already a TV show, but I mean, like as accurate as it could be and without filtering anything out, TV show. So I just don't know. That kind of maybe throws things off schedule though, because that's 2 books, which is an entire month of material. And I'll just have to see. So anyway, now that I've calmed down, again, sorry that it was such a long video. I think I've only made a video over 2 hours like one other time, and that was reading the extras in Thousand Autumns. But yeah, that's, you guys, please let me know your thoughts and reactions on these chapters in the comment section. And I'll see you next time when we either finish out the book or when we almost finish out the book. What more than likely what's going to happen is you'll get another video on Friday, and then I'll just read the rest and put that out on Saturday. And in the meantime, and in between time, in case the last 70 pages don't pull me to continue reading, I'm going to think about what the hell I'm going to do as far as the reading schedule. Because for the books that I do have on the schedule, it's a little too early to be reading them, I suppose, as far as the launching of my Patreon and all of that, because these books do contain smut in them. So we've got to figure life out. Oh my God. All right. I'm done rambling. I'll see you guys below. And Wahng.